Kia ora tātou, and welcome to this reconvened hearing into Plan Change 49, Variation 1, the Upper Hutt City Council. I'll start by asking Te Kahu Council to open the day for us for the country.
Te kara me timatanga ahua tango tēnei rā ki ngā taonga tuku hua kui mā koroma o rāko te kara kia tērā. O reira me inoi tātou. Aro whaki te kāhui ngā pai o re mutaka. Tau hōka I te awaka I rangi te mārua I wāhi o hōka tia e ngā. Mā runga ngā hau kāre tūrona ki mai te manu ki o rongo mai. Ki te aro ka hukura ki te whaia ki te marama ti hai mauri o. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai e hi ake ana te atāpura he tio, he huka, he hau hu ti hai mauri o. A tēnei e mihi atu ana kia kautanga kai komihana, mihi hoki atu ana kia kautau te māre ko tau mai ki wanganui a tātou he whakawhiti whakaaro te maki. Tēnei e mihi atu kia tātou katoa.
Kia ora, kia ora te kai. Thank you so much for that. And as we came in today and saw the mist coming up from here, I think there is no doubt that there was a frosty start to the day that the winds may well blow away throughout the course of this hearing. Thank you also very much for your gracious welcoming of us back into your council space. It is a privilege for all of us to be in that space, and also for you to extend such a warm welcome to us throughout this process. It really has been appreciated. So thank you very much. Because this is a reconvened hearing, we will briefly introduce ourselves, and I know that I see familiar faces in the room, so there is no value, I think, to be gained in us doing full introductions. But for the record, I am Sue Wells. I'm the independent chair of this hearings panel. I'll throw to you.
Kia ora, ko ana Kumiro Kara France, Takoinga Independent Hearing Commissioner, ko wakato tainoi, ko Ngāti Koreke Kahokora, ko Ngāti Tepa, ko Ngāti Kōrata ki Rangatoro ki te tonga, ko Rongo Maiwahine, ko Kahanene, ko Ngāti Pahoera, ko Ngāti Papoia, ko Mangaharu, tangatu ki Tongo, ko Ngāti Whakare, Ngāti Ruriko, ko Ngāti Papoia, ko Ngāti Tūwhare Tō, ko Ngāti Tarangi Ita, ko Te Ata Haunui a Paparangi, ko Tūmango, ko Tūpoho, ko Pairangi, ko Ngā Rauru, ko Ngāti Hini Wai Atarua. E ngā whānau, e ngā hapu, e ngā iwi, e ngā tangiwa, nō reira, tēnā tātou, katoa. Nau mai haere mai, kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. Mr. Muspratt.
Kia ora. I'm Matt Muspratt, Independent Planner.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to run through a schedule that I have for the day. And this is a draft. I don't know, Haley, if this is actually up on the website in terms of the timeline for the day, but doesn't matter. If not,
the original one is, there's been a few little
okay, that's fine. So the order of business is as set out on the reconvened hearing timetable for the day. We're going to stick with that. The scene setting that you'll see at the top of that is a reminder that this is a reconvened hearing. It is not a rebuttal hearing. It is a reconvened hearing. It was set out in Mint 9 very clearly, and you will see an advice note at the back of that I'm really going to ask you to focus on in terms of submitters. The purpose of this hearing, as it says in here, is very focused. It is not a rebuttal hearing, nor is it intended to be a second bite at the cherry. It is to help the panel in our deliberations and to ensure that there are no gaps in our knowledge on the specified issue. This hearing came about because Forest and Bird at some point alerted the hearing to the fact that we did not have expert ecological evidence from council. The panel can request that. We have it today, and we will be hearing that from Mr. Goldwater. So in terms of the scope of the hearing, and this probably more for submitters, lay submitters than anyone else, I'm going to really keep you in that zone today. And I don't want you to feel offended if I do that, but if you're going back to somewhere you've been before that's not helping us with this new bit, or if you're heading into a different conversation altogether, I'm going to keep drawing you back to minute 9. And that's not me being rude. We've said to everybody, we're having a talk today about these specific things. And it's my job as chair to make sure that that process is followed so that it's fair. So if I seem a little more directive than previously, it's not because I've woken up grumpy. It's simply because it's a different part of the hearings process today. And these are quite unusual. You know, it's not usual to have a reconvened hearing. And for that reason, they do run as a hearing within a hearing, and we've got some pretty specific things that we have to do. So we're clear about the scope. One of the things that we are going to be focusing on today is the maps. Now, it's really important that we know the pieces that we're talking about. One of the things that I'm going to do today is use some very rudimentary drawing skills on that whiteboard to give a rough area indication of the bits we're talking about, to make sure we're talking about the same bits. Because there is some confusion in the panel's mind at this point about which bits we're talking about. We just need to make sure we're all talking about the same bits. So there will be some layperson's jargon today. If there is such a thing, it may well be that that is a contradiction to you. I have 2 procedural matters. The first is we received an email via Ms. Boyd yesterday, or I did, from Mr. Patterson. He is aware that that matter is being addressed at the start of the hearing, Hayley? Yes. Mr. Patterson indicated some concerns about Mr. Musprat as a panel member, and that was based on Mr. Musprat having been an expert independent witness for council at the intensification planning instrument hearings that were held last year. That email has been received, and the matter will be responded to either via a minute or in the eventual deliberations from the panel. So that email is not being received as a late submission. That was a procedural matter, and we will be continuing today. There will be no further conversation on that matter later in the day. All right. We have received 3 submissions that were out of time, and I will now formally move that these be accepted. They are from Save Our Hills, Mr. Pattinson to speak, and that is only on the submission. It is not on the procedural matter. Mrs. Pattinson, if she is available to come in via Zoom to address her late submission, otherwise her late submission, I move, will be taken as read. And Mr. Grant Taylor, we also received a late submission from him. So I will move that those late submissions be considered by the panel. Is there any opposition to that?
No.
There is none. That will be recorded. Hayley, thank you very much. 9:11. Have I missed anything? Housekeeping. In the event of an emergency, exit is that way. Follow the chair. Bathrooms that way. Morning tea, 10:30. I think on that note, are we happy to box off?
Thank you.
Right, Ms. Rushmere. We are in your hands. Now, we have all received your updated Section 42A report. And if it is helpful to you, we have been through it in detail. I'm very happy to take you to paragraphs or however you would like to speak to it. Do you want to give us some preliminary thoughts? What's your...
Yeah, I'd like to get some thoughts if that's
Good as gold.
if that's okay.
Absolutely fine. We have 30 minutes and that includes question time.
Yeah.
Right.
See, I'm a different Section 42A writer than what started the hearing. Ms. Thompson's been called away to do some other work within council, so I've taken up the mantle. So I just would like to confirm qualifications at page 7, paragraph 4.
Thank you.
Of the updated Section 42A report.
Yep.
And yeah, just have some sort of.
Thank you. And I'll take you to paragraph 6 and get you to confirm that you've read the code of conduct. Thank you.
I have, yes.
Thank you very much. Alrighty.
So purpose of the updated section 42A report was to assist the panel in making decisions on submissions received on variation 1 in matters related to minute 9.
Yeah.
Provide obviously clarity from for submitters and further submitters on how their submissions have been further considered for evidence. With regards to corrections, I've not provided any further commentary on the corrections identified in the initial section 42A report.
So just pause on that. That means that there will still be some
Yes.
errors that sit in the
Yes.
in this, and we're not going to recorrect those.
Yes.
Those will be done through your right of reply.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
However, there has been an error identified in paragraph 267
Mhm.
of the updated section 42A report, where it's noted that rule NOSZ R22 is in fact restricted discretion.
Say that again, please.
So rule NOSZ R22 is a restricted discretionary activity, and I incorrectly identified it in paragraphs 267 of the updated section 42A report as a discretion.
Pause just a second. Is this so you are now telling us that that is a correction to today's?
Yes.
Okay, so here is a new piece for us. We have an update to paragraph 267.
Yep.
Okay. And where it's that's NOSZ S4. And you're saying that should read to delete NOS S4 as a consequence of rule NOS R22 being a discretionary activity.
Sorry, apologies, it's that I'll just check the paragraph number, but I've identified that rule NOSZ R22 is discretionary, is in fact restricted discretion.
Yes, that's the one I just read, isn't
Yeah.
it? So you're saying that the correction is, I'm looking at paragraph 267.
Yeah.
So if you look at the end of line 4,
Sorry.
oh sure, you're on.
Yeah. Might be 266, sorry. Bear with me 1 second.
267 is correct, I think.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is we should be including the.
Sorry, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, apologies.
That's
Yes,
all right.
under NOSZ S4, it's 267. Yes,
And you want the insertion of the word restricted.
restricted. Yes, please.
Okay, so that's a simple typo.
Yes.
Noted, and there we go. Alrighty, so we're back in the main body of your evidence.
Yeah.
I have a question for you on paragraph 13. Have you passed that yet?
Yes.
All right, can I just, actually, I think you've said expert advice from Mr. Goldwater.
Yeah.
It's expert evidence,
Yes,
isn't it?
correct. Yes.
So we'll correct that word
Yes,
from
please.
advice to evidence.
Yes.
Okay. So you've just taken us, so at paragraph 17, you note the methodology, which is the green underline.
Yes.
You've got the scope, which is in relation to minute 9.
Yes.
Now, where had you got up to at that point?
Pretty much what you just said.
Rightio. Alrighty, so just pause for a second. And let me look at, I can come back to those as questions. Righto, so the next green bit, next green bit is on page 15, paragraph 52. Would that be right? Using my psychic powers,
That's
is that where
right.
you're going next?
Yes.
Lovely, where you go?
So yeah, just wanted to make some general commentary in terms of the topics. So the approach you set up, the approach I tried to highlight in green, what's changed just for ease of reference. And then the section 42A report, the changes largely relate to topic 4, significant natural areas. Topic 5, infrastructure, including a transport corridor, and topic 10, specific amendments. The topics haven't changed since the original section 42A report. I've just made some changes to commentary in each of those sections. Sort of jumping back a little bit in terms of the paragraph that you just referred to, in terms of 50, I think it's 52. That was just addressing further the National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity and the legal advice that we received. Whether section 3.86 has been triggered.
Yeah, and the grunty bit there is your final line, which says, however, the Silver Stream Spur proposed area of significant indigenous vegetation and variation one is considered to be an SNA for the purpose of the NPSA. So that's the new information.
Yeah. In terms of recommended amendments, no further recommendations have been made in the updated section 42A report to the required diversity offset, the accidental discovery protocol, and NFSZ P6.
Pause for a second, please.
Should I have it on?
Are we expecting it?
Not yet.
What time are we expecting?
After the meeting. After lunch, sorry.
No, he's fine because he'll be very interested. Yeah, good as gold. So, we're just being joined. We're just being joined, via Zoom, Mr. Zooming in, and he is counsel for Forest and Bird.
There's people that are saying they can't find the live stream.
Yeah, sorry, and it's.
Thank you, don't. That's something, if you have comments like that, by all means, indicate to Nick, but we'll carry on. Thank you.
However, there are some changes recommended to NOS P7 to recognise the significant.
Sorry,
Sorry.
Just pause for a second. I've just, shh, please. I've just lost my train of thought. So, we are now back at which paragraph, please?
They probably not paragraph in terms of the section 42A, just general commentary about what's been amended post the original section 42A.
Thank you.
But I can try and find them as we go. I probably should. Yes, it's my opening statement. So I would jump to topic 10, which is on page. Starts on page 49. So paragraph 263, no changes are proposed to NOS P6. A slight amendment proposed to NOSZ P7 as a consequence of changes to the rules, and that's just inserting the word significant.
Sorry, just 1 minute. You first one, which paragraph are you on?
264.
264. There's no change.
No, I apologise. That was another omission on my part. That was a consequential amendment of introducing the significant natural areas.
So it is paragraph 264, which is currently coloured black.
Yeah.
Should that be coloured green and underlined?
No, there should be some additional text, which just confirming that there was a consequential amendment to policy in respect of identifying the significant natural area of the Silver Stream.
In relation to submissions, blah, blah, I do not recommend deleting NOS P7. Are we talking about the same one?
Yeah, so that was from the original section 42A,
Yeah.
and I should have added text in the updated section 42A to say there's been a consequence.
So are you saying now that you are wanting to add some text in?
Just to correct the error in section 42, I report that there's a consequential amendment to POS P7 as a result of the identification of the significant natural areas.
So can you just go to that paragraph for me?
Yeah.
And tell me what it is that you want changed in there?
Yeah, I think as a consequential amendment, to the introduction of the significant natural area in the Silver Stream Spur, that policy NOSZ P7 now reads Silver Stream Spur significant natural area rather than Silver Stream Spur natural.
Okay, gotcha. So it's relating to the terminology.
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay. So consequential amendment, got it, I understand. Finally, coffee's kicking in.
mine isn't. The next change is NOS ZR15 in the section 42A updated report, and again that's to insert the word significant.
And where are we?
So
So
we're now on
paragraph.
1 paragraph 262 onwards. And then in appendix A,
Yep.
page 56, new rule NOSZR15, insertion of the word significant natural area, or significant, prior to natural area,
Yep.
and the change in activity status from control to discretion.
Discretionary or restricted discretion?
Discretion.
So it's discretionary or rule?
NOSZR15.
Okay, yeah.
And consequently removed the compliant, the matters over which council restricts its control.
Yeah.
Consequential amendment to delete NOSZR4, which were the standards that related to the previously controlled.
Yep.
And then on page 57 of appendix and starting at paragraph 266 of section 42A report.
Just a second while I just pull it up, please. Page 56.
57 of that appendix.
Yeah. And
then starts at paragraph 266.
sorry, what are we doing on page 57 of the again?
I was just going to confirm what the changes are for rule NOS said.
The pots in green, yeah?
Yeah.
The council shall restrict its discretion to the following matters.
Yeah. And also inclusion of the words recognition.
Yep, so the 7 points.
Yep.
And its activity status is restricted discretionary.
Yep.
Okay.
At the previous hearing, it's noted it was a restricted discretionary activity, but there was no matters to which.
Understood. All right, so those are the matters that are there. Okay,
Yeah.
lovely.
So that's the changes.
Mhm.
That's what goes through the updated section 42A report.
Thank you.
Jim recommended the amendments. I've relied on assessments undertaken by Wildlands and the evidence of Mr. Goldwater. I note that there are pointed differences between the experts in terms of the extent, but I'm unable to comment further on that, as it's brought outside of my expertise. So moving on, I confirm that I've read the expert evidence provided by Guildford Timber Company and Royal Forest and Bird. With respect to legal submission from Royal Forest and Bird that a road is inappropriate and rule NOSZ R15 should be deleted. I note that if NOSZ R15 was deleted, the wider plan change 49 can still provide a consenting pathway for infrastructure on Silver Stream Spur under rule NOS R19. Rule NOSZ R19
would still provide a consenting path.
Yeah. So that rule is a rule that applies to all natural open space zones.
We've got it in here somewhere, haven't we? Have we?
Yeah, should.
Where is it?
Should be as part of the wider
You got it.
plan change 49.
I'm just wondering if we have the rule at hand. That's the one that comes out of PC 49. The rules framework that relate to the wider.
Yes. Yeah, and if it helps, it's a catch-all discretionary rule.
Be nice to have those.
Yeah.
If we can get that, actually, smiling sweet getting it. Please, could we have that ASAP? Those existing rules just brought forward?
Up until
Be lovely, thank you.
So the catch-all rule basically states that any activity that is not listed as permitted, restricted, discretionary, or non-complying is a discretionary activity. So like I said, once it doesn't specifically reference infrastructure, it could still provide a consented pathway for the natural open space. So, therefore excluding an entire silver stream spur or the significant natural area within the silver stream is very likely to need a specific rule through the variation. So if there was a desire to specifically exclude a road on the silver stream spur, it would have to be done through a rule in the variation rather than deleting rule R15.
Yes, it does.
And obviously there'll be consequential amendments that will be required to policy NOS ZP6, which relates specifically to them.
So exclusion of a road on the spur.
Yeah.
Would need to be done.
Via a rule in the variation rather than by deleting NOSZ.
By a rule and variation. Rather than by deleting.
NOSZ R15.
Okay.
Because if you delete NOSZ R15, potentially
You've got an underpinning framework that
Yeah.
still remains.
Yeah.
Understood.
I do acknowledge that if NOSZ R15 is amended to a discretionary activity, that might create tension with policy NOSZ B6, which has a more enabling chapter. Then could be potentially provided for by the rule if it's changed to discretionary. If the panel were to accept recommended amendments to R15, then removing the chapeau and NOSZ P6 altogether, or amending the wording to provide opportunities for infrastructure would be more consistent with this.
Removing the what?
The chapeau, sorry, the enabling, the word enabling, so changing the word enabling to provide.
Okay.
With regards to legal submission from GTC, I acknowledge that in recognising that there is a significant natural area on the site, but the recommended amendments in the updated section 42A report might have led to some lack of clarity or unintended consequences. I understand that rule NOSZ R15 is notified apply to the whole of the silver stream spur, since subclause H has notified refer to effects on significant silver stream spur.
Yeah. So R15 as notified.
Yeah.
Applies.
To the wider silver stream spur.
And are you now saying it should only apply to the SNA?
Well, the section 42A report
Yes.
identified that it should then only refer to this section, to the significant natural area.
So to be clear, that's your position.
Yeah, that's my position, that
Yep.
the legal submission from GTC raised the issue that could cause a problem for outside of the
Got it.
outside of
Yeah.
the
So
site.
R15 intention is it only applies to the SNA.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
But obviously in responding to GTC legal submission, I refer back to that catch-all
Yeah.
rule
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
NOSZ
Got it.
19. Obviously, but the panel may wish to consider an alternative by amending NOSZ R15 to relate to the whole of the spur again, rather than which might provide some additional clarity to plan users rather than just. My recommendation at this stage would be that a discretionary activity status applies both within and outside the silver stream spur. And that would address any effects on infrastructure that's not within but adjacent to the SNA, enable all effects to be considered, and it will be consistent with the activity status for other natural sites. In respect of rule NOSZ R22, GTC and their legal submission raised again a similar issue within and without the significant natural area. I note that there are provisions for the removal of Indigenous vegetation in the ecosystems and Indigenous biodiversity chapter of the Operative District Plan. So that would provide that opportunity. But then doesn't obviously, if the rule only applies to significant natural areas, you've got a consistent approach with other natural open space zones if you default to the ecological chapter of the district plan.
Understand.
But it wouldn't then provide, it wouldn't necessarily provide protection for Indigenous biodiversity yet. That's on the Silver Streams, but outside of a significant natural area, because it's either we haven't undertaken a wider plan change to give full effect to the NPS IB yet, including the effects management that was identified. That's probably enough. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Lovely, thank you. I know there'll be, do you have that written?
Yes, and I can provide that to you.
Yeah, thank you. It will be helpful today if we can have anything like that in advance.
Yeah.
That way it's going to help me understand where we're going, make sure that we're not veering off course.
Yeah.
And I am going to keep focusing people on paragraph numbers and helping people walk through like that, okay?
Yeah.
So you've been first cab off the rank. You poor thing, I apologise if I sound cheesy.
No, I appreciate it. There's quite a lot to get there.
Yeah, all right. Mr. Muscle.
Yes,
You go first.
oh, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Rushmere. I have two questions. They're quite technical, so I'm very happy for these to be provided in the writing reply.
Or, well, let's see how technical they are, because they may well be.
Yeah, okay, let's see how it goes.
No,
So the first question is about, the wording of NOSZ P7
Yeah.
and NOSZ R15.
Yeah.
And whether those provisions give effect to clause 310, subclause 2 of the NPSIB
I know he's showing up.
and subclause 3. So subclause 2 sets out a list of adverse effects on an SNA that must be avoided. Subclause 3 states that effects that don't fall under subclause 2 must be managed by the investment hierarchy. So I'm just, yeah, if you could take a look at that, give us your opinion on whether those two provisions, SCP7 and R15, give effect to those requirements. Unless you'd like to answer that now.
I would refer that to. I mean, look, gut feeling is yes, but I would refer to to have a look. I mean, albeit what I've just sort of set out in terms of that policy and ZP7. If the changes are as recommended in my section 42 report stay as they are, then yes, I think that would apply to that significant natural area. But yeah, I'll refer to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Second question, it's also about the NPSIB. It relates to the recently released FDS and
FDS.
future development strategy.
Mhm.
I understand it's been approved,
Yeah.
and I understand, but I'll get you to confirm that the southern growth area is not identified in there as a growth area or a greenfield area. If that's not my question, if that is the case, if not in there, could you provide your advice on whether a road through the spur would fall under any exceptions under 3.11 of the NPSIB?
I'm just going to bring us back to minute 9 and get you to frame that question in such a way that I can connect it with the purpose of 23.
Yes, well, in order to understand the effects on the SNA and whether the provisions of rule policy NSCP7 and rule 15 give effect to the requirements of the NPSIB with respect to avoiding adverse effects on the SNA. I'd need to understand the status of the southern growth area in the future development strategy, because that obviously has a big implication on the interpretation or giving effect to clause 3.11.
Yeah.
Side B.
So I can answer the question on the applicant.
Only if it's relevant to the hearing today. I mean, we're aware that it's come out.
Yeah.
That's public knowledge.
Yeah.
That is something that I don't know if Ms. Tancock's planning on discussing or not.
If it was helpful to the panel, we have prepared response on that.
Well, I mean, it is, the thing with this hearing, over to comment here. The thing with this hearing is it's very focused. And we're not in a vacuum. We know that's happening, but today's hearing really is about the ecological evidence. I don't have any appetite to have yet another hearing on the FDS, and its implications. But nor do I want this hearing to go down a path of let's have a great big debate about the FDS or its implications. It's about ecology today.
I understand your concerns. We've got it if it's helpful in terms
Yeah,
of updating
so-
the decision making.
Are you happy with
Yes,
this?
no, I
Have to
understand.
write a reply, or do you think
I'm
people are
happy
going to
with that.
be disadvantaged by that?
I think.
There's a bit of a chicken and egg thing here,
Yeah.
isn't there? There's almost, do we need to?
I don't
turn
think,
our
yeah,
eyes to it?
I don't think we need to ask the question.
I mean, I guess that the question I would pose is it something that cannot be avoided in order to have an open conversation about it in the context of the SNA? That's the only thing. But I do not want this hearing to descend into yet another discussion around housing and future development. Make sense?
Understood, yes.
So-
My question was about
That nexus.
how we give effect to the side B with respect to the extent of SNA and how that connects with the other issues, but I'm happy to.
Cool. Welcome. Any from you, or shall I carry on? Right, I'm going to go back to my sticky notes and cover off what hasn't been covered off. Right. We're going to deal with the maps. I'm going to sketch shortly. The rules, read the road. You've covered that. The question I have for you is, I do have one, that's the rules there, got that written down. What on earth does that say? Oh, submissions to check. Matters raised by submissions. You had on page 21, paragraph 92. Submissions S27.1, 67.1 and 68.1 oppose the entire variation and seek it be deleted or abandoned. They strongly oppose the provisions for infrastructure, including a transport corridor, and would like to see the spur replanted in native vegetation. Just double checking, are there any changes to any of the submissions analysis that we need to be alerted to, or have you considered whether this revised section 42A report needs to change your response in the submissions?
Yep. And those are identified in green.
Yep.
So the first place they appear, I can see on page 33.
Yep.
Where 2 rejects now sit and they accepted in part.
Yep. And I guess the question is, you're confident you've got them all?
I think so.
Righto.
As confident as I can.
Excellent, that's absolutely fine. It's fine. Why is that stitched together like that? Figure 3 greater than. Just taking you to your. No, I won't. Yeah, I'll have to. Okay. We are gonna play Let's Draw the Maps now. Because, and we're gonna do it now before you, because we're gonna start with. You're good? Yep. Mr. Williams, thank you for joining us by Zoom. You weren't here right at the start when I outlined that one of the things I'm going to do today to help me is draw some maps. Now, starting with what I can see on page 32 and going over this whiteboard here. And it goes something like this. Here is the site, for argument's sake. Yep. Here's Kiln Street. Yep. That, is that about right? Kiln
Where's
Street,
north? Where's north?
is that right? Roughly? More or less?
Yep.
That's
yes,
about
yes,
right?
yes. Right.
Excellent. Now. Reynolds Dispatch drivers over here somewhere? About there?
Uh,
RBD? D, the railway is up there. Somewhere. Yep. Now, I'm looking at your map. I'm not going to draw your map because it's problematic on page 32, but the updated combined area within the Silver Stream Spur is recommended to be identified as the Silver Stream Spur natural area. You know where I am?
Yeah.
Okay, so the combined extent of SNA for the Silver Stream Spur with magenta outline showing extent, magenta outline goes beyond the site, right?
Yes, another change. Yes,
So the site is not actually marked on it.
not on page 32. That came, I believe that came from the evidence from the expert witness, but
So what I'm trying to get to now, at this moment in time, Ms. Rushmere, is what you think that SNA is.
Yeah.
So we've got some options.
yes,
There's the SNA which has, and this is not UH070,
no,
right? This is the bit of the SNA
Yes.
that's within the site,
yes,
not the whole
because it
SNA.
specifically relates to the service streets.
So there's a gully bit that's there somewhere, is that right?
Yeah.
Gully, we'll call that gully. Creative, I know. We've got a blob that's sort of about here, is that right?
No, shall I bring the map?
No, don't bring the map, I've got the map. The blob is actually more, well, there's a couple of blobs, aren't there? I should have brought
The
my,
map on page 59 might be more helpful in
Good.
terms of that.
that's in the appendix, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The orange bit,
Yes.
Yes.
okay. So the orange bit then. Orange bit, I'm gonna keep you in, red, right? You're red. You remember your colour.
I will.
All right, you're red. So the orange bit is, I had it just a minute ago, it's sort of. So we've got some wiggly bits along there. And then we've got a wee hook. And then we've got sort of a thing like that there, yeah?
Yeah.
It goes down there. So it's kind of like, sort of like a wee sea monster. I don't think we'll call it that, but you know what I mean, don't you? But that's basically it. Now, is that one area or are there a number of bits of areas? For the purposes of your evidence, you've got two bits. You've got in yours it says the white bit, and then you've got the magenta bit.
Yeah.
Now, the white bit in your evidence, if I'm correct, is pretty much the gully plus a bit at the bottom of the gully. So, what I think you've said is that your version of the SNA would be something like, here we go, we're going to the blue bit now, would be something like that. Is that right? Have I got that right?
If I may, I might refer to Mr. Goldwater who provided the shape files that created the map at the bottom in terms of that white blob and versus.
Well, what I'm trying to do is actually take figure 3 on page 32 and basically it doesn't match what's on page 59.
No.
So what I'm trying to understand is figure 2 the one, or is what's on page 59 the one? Do we put a line through figure 3 or?
Be helpful for you to look at this map.
Well, no, what I'm trying to understand is, we've got this, right? What, Ms. Rushman, what is this figure 3? Is this what we should be accepting as your recommendation or?
So figure 3, as far as I understand it, help me out, if that's okay, was that came through from your evidence in terms of removing some of that?
Yeah, that's right. That is
It says,
part of an assessment carried out previously by Williams.
it says the ecological expert recommends removing half of the area shown in white above.
Yes.
So that's not indicated on this
No.
figure 3.
No.
So for the panels usefulness,
Yes.
ignore figure 3.
Yes. So that the half that's removed is the kind of
So let's
bottom bit.
let's ditch that then.
Yeah.
So we're not dealing with figure 3 anymore.
No.
All right. So the map, from your perspective,
Yes.
that is the one we should be looking at, is the one on page 59.
Yes.
And the one on page 59 still the one on page 59 does this thing. That's where we had a sea monster thing there. It's like that. Then we go wiggle, wiggle. And then we've got still got a gully, but on page 59, you say the gully should go.
Yes.
So we'll cross out the gully.
Yes.
Right? We're going to call this bit the bottom bit. Any objections? Thank you. The gully or the bottom bit?
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I'm now absolutely clear on what we're doing. Mr. Goldwater. Good morning. Let me just pull your evidence out of my folder.
Good morning.
Now, you have not presented to us before. We have not met you before.
Correct.
So I would ask, let's do a proper introduction. Sue Wells, Independent Hearings Commissioner, appointed to chair the panel. Been working with the RMA since 1995.
My name's
Hang on, we haven't finished yet.
Okay.
To my left.
Aina Camilo France, Independent Hearing Commissioner. Tēnā koe. Nau mahe.
Matt?
Morning, I'm Matt Muspratt, Independent Planner.
Good morning.
Thank you.
My name is Nicholas Goldwater. I am Principal Ecologist at Wildland Consultants based in Auckland. I've been there for about 16 years. And I'm the ecologist for council up to date.
Lovely, thank you. Now, we have read your statement of evidence. We have sat down until morning tea at 10:30 to talk to you. And that includes question time. I appreciate that is not a lot of time, but we are quite focused on, as you will have gleaned already, this area of the spur. And is it going to be, have you got some preliminary notes?
Yes, I've got a short summary.
All right, that's great. I'll let you
Yeah.
go through that. And then if you can help us with paragraph numbers as you go, that'd be great. If
Okay.
not, that's fine.
I won't be referring to paragraph numbers in my summary.
You won't.
No.
All right.
And,
Okay, away you go. We'll listen without interruption.
Okay, firstly, I can confirm my qualifications and
Thank you.
experience, paragraphs 27 in my evidence in chief, and also I've read the code of conduct. So my name is Nicholas Goldwater. I've provided evidence dated 8th March 2024 on behalf of the council on respect of matters arising from submissions on variation 1 and change 49 Silver Stream Spur, specifically with regard to draft SNA UH070. My evidence includes a response to the evidence of Dr. Vaughan Keesing, which he prepared on behalf of the Guildford Timber Company. My evidence also includes commentary on various ecological issues raised by submitters. I peer reviewed the original report prepared by Wildland Consultants in 2021. First visited the spur in December 2023. With the benefit of having visited the site, or part of the site, and read various supporting documents, my assessment differs slightly to that of the Wildlands 2021 report. Both assessments, however, conclude that the spur meets the ecological context criteria. Although the location of the spur in relation to other natural areas in the Hutt Valley does lend itself to acting as a stepping stone to larger tracts of indigenous forest for highly mobile bird species, I agree with Dr. Keesing that such evidence is lacking. I also note that the ecological corridors study undertaken by Ross et al. In 2019 found that, in quotes, only certain birds would utilise the spur's corridor function, end quote. As such, I am wary of attributing significance to the site based on stepping stone habitat alone. Dr. Keesing is of the opinion that Wildlands analysis of vegetation at Silver Stream Spur has resulted in assigning significance to some vegetation types when they should instead be excluded from the SNA. In particular, Dr. Keesing considers that areas dominated by tree ferns, such as ponga and mamaku, do not have the requisite ecological values to meet the SNA standard. During my site visit, I was able to inspect the vegetation types that Dr. Keesing has described in his evidence. While Dr. Keesing and I largely agree on the composition and structure of the vegetation of the spur, we differ in our interpretation of how the significance criteria should apply to the area of ponga mamaku tree fern land with respect to the ecological context criteria. In my opinion,
Can I just get you to pause for a second?
sure,
Can I go to the map?
sure.
Because we're talking about a bit, aren't we?
Yeah, we're talking about a central part of that draft.
I don't, just. I go to the map. The bit you're talking about is located where? Is it in the gully or is it the bottom bit?
In the bottom bit.
Left or right?
It goes from east to west.
Right across?
Yes. Almost. Well, from the west.
Come and draw it for me.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the bit I want to understand. Makes me think of things. Okay, so,
Yeah. Sorry, no one to.
right, just if you can just draw the bit you're disagreeing on, yeah. Doesn't have to be bang on, you've seen how I draw.
Yeah.
It can only get better, right? So that's a different bit again.
Well,
It's like, okay, I didn't draw it right. Thank you. Now, you can see that, Dr. Pearson?
Yeah.
Is that about right? Is that the bit that you think we disagree about?
It's the top we agree at, the bottom is the bottom we agree at, and all of the middle side.
Is there a bit that you think you don't?
Can we just accept that that's not quite right?
Yes,
There we are.
absolutely.
Yeah, we
Right,
do.
so,
you know, this is it or
you know, you're going to sit down now because what I just want to check, so we
That's
go back.
that's the bit.
Good, we're making progress. So we actually have a piece that we appear to be agreeing about.
We do, and the bottom. The bottom is
So
the
we're
bottom.
agreeing about the top of the bottom bit. We'll call this the middle bit. Okay? We agree with the middle bit.
Yes. And we agree with the bottom of the bottom.
Well, hang on then. This is getting better and better. Middle is good. Middle's going to be green. Green for go. I hope, Mr. Williams, that you are not shaking your head in disbelief at what you're saying. The middle bit is good. Yep. The bottom of the bottom you also agree with. Is that the bit that's underneath this thing called bottom bit?
Yeah, well, yes, and the margin of that thing below boundary line, we agree there's an area in there that is,
So it's pretty much under here.
yes. Bottom of the bottom.
The bottom of the bottom bit, if we call that the edge bit, is that all right?
Yeah, it's sort of more to the east, isn't it, as well? We're talking about that beach Kamahi area.
Yeah, so there's a lot, below that line, there's a lot more.
Understood. So it's the beach Kamahi area that's at the edge and towards the east. Okay, so the beach, the green is not great, but the beach Kamahi area under and to the east. We're both saying that that meets the criteria
Yeah.
as an SNA.
And there's a line in this property that reflects that. And it's something like.
Right, so we've got two bits then that we've got some disagreement on. We've got the gully, yeah, which you say should be deleted, but you say can stay. And we've got this part here, the blue bit, which is the part that you're now talking about as being the area of Ponga and carry on there. This is the middle, but this is the Ponga Mabaku bit, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
lovely. Where you go, thank you.
So, in my opinion, it is the two remnants of beach Kamahi forest that are relevant when assessing the inherent value of the low diversity Ponga Mamaku tree fern land against the significance criteria set out in policy 23 of the RPS and appendix 1 of the National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity. This is because the tree fern land provides a contiguous east-west linkage between the two forest remnants, while also providing a partial buffering function. Specifically, I consider the area of Ponga Mamaku tree fern land satisfies the linkage, connectivity, and buffering attributes of the ecological context criteria in both policy 23 and the EPSIB, particularly given the location between the two SNA quality areas of beach Kamahi forest. A new road would permanently bisect the core part of the spur, which in turn could compromise the linkage function of the Ponga Mamaku tree fern land that presently sits between two higher value areas of beach Kamahi forest. I am unsure what other vegetation types would be affected by a new road, although I assume that they are mostly dominated by exotic species such as pine. Accordingly, I recommend that the boundary of SNA UH 070 remains in the current form, with the exception of the small exclusion I've described in paragraph 30 of my evidence. That's that gully. With regard to the issues raised by submitters, the majority of submitters support rezoning the spur to natural open space and oppose a new transport corridor. Many of the submissions outline the potential adverse effects that could result from the construction and operation of the corridor. I agree with some of their conclusions, although further ecological surveys would be needed to inform a rigorous assessment of effects. Thank you, my summary.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. That was really helpful. And thank you for, I guess you do that in every hearing, maybe not. Sometimes. Okay. Now, Commissioner, I know you have a question.
I do have a question. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Goldwater, just in regards to Mātauranga Māori, what is your understanding of Mātauranga Māori concerning Te Taio, please?
Are you talking about specifically with the site?
In general, with the site as well. Just focus on the site.
Yeah, that's quite a difficult.
Do you want to try that question again?
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, thank you for your presentation.
Right.
You have highlighted Ponga species which are relevant within Te Taio,
Yes.
which are relevant within Mātauranga Māori concerning Te Taio. So I'll rephrase the question.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
What is your understanding of Mātauranga Māori concerning Te Taio, please?
Probably fairly limited. I mean, I appreciate Mātauranga Māori in terms of and Heo Māori in terms of the how you know Māori see you know biodiversity and nature. In terms of the site specifically, I'd say my understanding is fairly limited. You know, there are obviously various taranga species of note, but yeah, I guess that what really wasn't the focus of my evidence, so it's probably a little outside the scope. But I definitely appreciate your question. I'd just say it's probably beyond the scope of my brief.
Thank you.
I'm sorry if that's very. Probably
No, it's clear.
No, it's
It's
clear.
clear and
Thank you.
it's a clear and honest answer, and that's perfectly fine.
Thank you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right, let me do this. Okay. So let's begin by me getting clear. Is UH 070 broader than the site area, or is it exactly the site area?
It's broader.
Okay, so this site is a subset of UH 070.
Yeah.
So the east-west linkage connectivity in the blue bit,
Yes.
what is it connecting to?
Um,
Connecting to bits outside of the site, yeah?
yes, that's right. I don't, if you can see this map here,
Yeah, that's on page,
page 9 of my evidence.
yeah. So that indicates to me it's connecting.
Can you see that area of Beach Carmahine Forest to the east?
Well, see what I'm looking at now. This is why I drew that. So the Appendix 1 site map on here, it looks like it's entirely within the site. It's outlined in white, yeah? Tiny
I
little
don't know if
bit.
we're looking at the same.
That's what I'm asking. So
Which-
Appendix 1 site map, yeah?
I wonder.
Would you like to come and show me what you've got?
Yeah, sure.
So we've seen the area in purple, that's the area. Briefing. And we've got that area of white there is the area that's Dr. Keesing identified. And also that little blob there.
So I don't understand on there where the east-west connectivity bit is.
Oh, so this is basically this area here is the connection.
So it's the,
You've got the area of Beach Carmahine Forest here.
which is, see, I'm really struggling to read this because the keys aren't. If.
Sorry.
Is it the bit? You've got,
Yeah, you've got area of Treeford, the Mamaku on that Treeford.
so the east-west connectivity is the magenta outline, is that what it is?
Yeah, it is, because you've got this, you see this area here, which is outside the property, Beach Carmahine Forest.
Okay.
You've got the area of similar forest here.
Right, so what I think you've just shown me there on page 9 of Appendix 1. Going back over here, yeah? Now, purple bit there drifts right down to the bottom. Dr. Keesing, is that the bit that you are in agreement with? The bit down here that
Yeah,
looks,
the
that
down-
funny looking bit in
Yeah.
magenta, you agree with all of that?
That the part of the
All of
part
it?
of 17 below. Not all of it. There are some edges below our property that are still in question.
Well,
But yes, generally there.
I'm going to ask Dr. Keesing, on page 9, are there bits in that magenta outline that you think should not be included in the SNA?
Only on the property?
Only on the property. Yeah, that's quite hard to see. And it's exactly this is the problem I've got. So,
Would you like to use my copy? Seems to be.
no, it's same. I mean,
Do you want to compare it with what you've got?
when you come to speak, Dr. Keeson,
Yes.
that is one of the material questions I have, to understand exactly what the is, right?
Yeah.
So I'll get you to come back to that. The connectivity, you're going into an area of beach kamahi forest at there, which is outside of the site. And someone will remind me who owns that land? So that's private land.
Yes.
Okay. And to the east of it, the east-west connectivity, oh, that's west. Where is it connecting to the west?
So you can, this area here
Mm.
is the area of beach kamahi forest that Dr. Keesing identified.
Yeah,
And you can see that the Ponga Mamaku tree fern land is contiguous with that, provides it buffers that and also then extends towards the east.
yeah, I understand that, but where's the western connection?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that it goes from west.
Okay, so that's the start point.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's basically between
Gotcha.
those two areas.
No, that's grand, thank you. Did you review the evidence of Dr. Masick?
Yes,
And that's just a correction then to your evidence?
yes, it's, yeah,
All right,
That's-
so we'll note that that is a correction and you did in fact review the evidence of
I did.
Dr. Masick, thank you very much. So you took a site visit?
Yes, December.
Yep, and did you go into the gully?
No, I didn't go to the gully. So my my opinion on the gully is really based on site notes from my colleagues at Wildlands.
Mhm.
So if Dr. Keesing has been there and can talk to the quality, I'd be happy to
You open to that?
open it, yeah,
Oh,
look at
that's fine.
including that in SNA.
So is it normal to say it's not an SNA if you haven't been into it?
Well, it's basically because it's very, very narrow
Yeah.
and based on the description that seemed quite sparse and prone to weeds. I just thought I took a sort of more conservative view of that.
Would it be fair to say at the moment you don't have enough evidence to support that position? No, the position of it being an SNA.
I took a conservative position based on the notes of my colleagues.
Right. Did you read the submissions?
Yes.
Was there anything in the submissions that occurred to you within the gully area that might have been a trigger around the SNA? Any observations from any of the submitters?
Yeah, later on that the more like the recent submitters.
Yeah.
Basically after my evidence, that it looked like they'd done a bit of groundwork themselves.
No, but even before that, at the previous hearing, we heard from people who were experiencing lizards and other fauna and things in there. Did you turn your mind to those, or was that?
No, I mean, because I think that was more talking about the spur in general rather than specific sites, as far as I understood.
All right.
But
that's
then,
fine.
but then in the later submissions, they've actually provided maps of
Mhm.
where they've gone, which is quite useful.
Yeah.
And some have provided very good botanical descriptions.
So in response to the submissions, which we'll hear later today, but are now in evidence, have you changed your view at all on the gully?
I think the values are probably higher than what I first ascertained.
Okay. To what extent? I mean, if you think about the level required for an SNA, is it there or?
It would probably meet the representativeness criterion if what the submitters are describing is accurate.
And they will no doubt present documentary
Yeah.
material in support of their submissions.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'd be interested in seeing photos and.
those are, yeah, I mean, okay, well, that's fine. So based on that, you could well change your view on the gully.
Yeah.
All right, that's good to know. So a new road would, at paragraph 32, would permanently bisect a core part of the spur. Would you accept that a road could be placed on the spur in such a way that it doesn't interfere with the SNA?
Yeah, interesting question.
Thank you.
Have to see where the road was.
You'd have to see where the road was. So you'd have to see where the road was. And check appendix 1 site map. Look, I actually think I'm pretty good. You good?
I just have one
Yeah, go
final question to add and follow up for the question that I did ask Mr. Goldwater. And that is from a Mātauranga Māori perspective in regards to tile and what we see here in terms of sites of significance or sites of natural area, significant natural area from Mātauranga Māori perspective, that's the entire area. It's never fenced off.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So thank you. Just to confirm that your own point, but just to reiterate, Mātauranga Māori perspective, it's the entire area, which is the site's significance regarding cultural values. Is that your understanding now? Can you see?
I can definitely appreciate, the holistic kind of perspective. And yeah, I know it's often we can be seen to sort of compartmentalize these issues, these vegetation types and ecosystems. But I appreciate as a whole they're all interconnected, and there are sort of broader values across the entire site. But I guess we, as ecologists as well, we're sort of bound by certain criteria we have to assess these sites with. So yeah, that can sometimes be, I guess, maybe conflict with Mātauranga Māori and how our Māori may view a site.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So from Mātauranga Māori perspective, species that are within this area, for example, whakapapa only to this area. And so from a mainstream ecologist perspective, what's your point of view in that? Does it compare?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the species there may not necessarily be endemic to that area, but I mean, I guess, are you talking about species that have grown there or visit there? Yeah, okay.
Whakapapa from that Pacific area.
Yeah, and you're talking about the spur and as that area, or
just in this particular area to focus on.
Yeah, that's a hard one to answer because I guess in my view, a lot of those species which whakapapa to the spur will be found elsewhere. But I know you'd attach special significance to those species which are which are found there. But for me it's quite difficult to put that into my assessment. If that, I know I'm rambling a bit, but
no, it's a difficult conversation to have, because what I'm hearing you say is training that you've had has been this kind of training, and you're not trained as I wasn't trained about Māori worldview or those sorts of things, to a point where those two things do that,
And that's
you know,
absolutely
and,
right.
and it's not about having a layer of it. I think there's not an integration yet. I think Dr. Keesing talked about that last time. There's not an integration yet between the underlying expectations around ecology and te ao Māori. You know, it's still seen very Western
At this particular time.
ecology.
Yeah, I think obviously that's, you know,
It's a
it's
state
gonna
of-
change.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the RPS, there is significance criteria. I think it's E, which
Yes.
does deal with taonga species and Māori values. Although that's not often used in assessments, I've only seen that criteria actually used a couple of times for SNAs. A lot of it's just lack of information for the people that are assessing it. They haven't got that cultural information. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your response. Last question. Are you aware that a tohunga has the same qualification as a mainstream ecologist?
You might want to translate.
No,
No.
I'm asking a question.
No, I'm not aware of that.
Thank you.
Within the RPS policy 23 criteria, am I correct that only one of those needs to be triggered?
Yes.
So although there are 5 of them, only 4 have been assessed?
That's right.
Yeah.
The fifth one being
Mm.
Māori values,
It's called tangata whenua. Yeah. So I can understand that not all of those things need to qualify, but do they not all need to be assessed?
Often these assessments are made in the absence of information. Like, for instance, rarity and distinctiveness. You'd have to actually fully assess that criteria. You'd have to go in and do quite detailed surveys for threatened species, say barking gecko, various other lizard.
And yet I'm looking at a table on page 2 from Wildlands in 2022, which shows that that's been assessed for UH 070, right? The proposed SNA UH 070 Joe Dillon was 2022.
Yes.
That shows that everything's been assessed except for E, tangata whenua. It says not assessed. Now that's not applicable. It says it's not been assessed.
Yes, I mean,
Right.
I think not assessed and not applicable will probably can be read in the same light.
Okay, let's just pause on that. Why has it not been assessed?
Well, from my experience in dealing with SNAs at Wellington, these are only assessed when certain information comes to light.
But how do you know this information going to come to light unless you assess it?
Because normally you do a desktop assessment and try and find out, you do literature review, to find out if there's any information. But often, it takes a lot of time to do that sometimes, and generally, that criterion is not assessed just because of lack of information. That's my understanding anyway.
Okay.
Dr. Keesing might want to talk to that as well.
I think, don't worry, I'll have the same probe with Dr. Keesing, because I think, I think about my background as a planning consultant and doing assessments against policies. And I would have expected that there is a difference between not assessed and not applicable. And to me, not assessed means I didn't do that bit, and I could expect somebody to say, why didn't you do that? I mean, I understand that you only need to meet one of those criteria. That's fine. But surely, even if it says desktop analysis did not indicate presence of, you know, but I just, it does trouble me.
Yeah, no, I accept that.
You know, because I think if you, and the reason, and this is a question, I don't often need to state that, but I think what the commissioner to my left is talking about, if you don't understand Te Ao Māori enough to know what you're looking at, how can you then say it doesn't need to be assessed? You know, that, and I just think there's a real gap in the traffic around this stuff.
I don't think the intention of the assessor here was saying, I don't think the implication was that it didn't need to be assessed. As I understand it, just there was no information at hand.
Yeah.
I accept that there's certainly maybe.
Yeah. Oh. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm gonna get off my perch.
No, I totally accept the support, Madam Chair. The question I ask is that consultants are contractable. I'll just leave that on the table.
I think, unless Mr. Muskrat.
I did have a bunch of questions, but the chair's.
There you go.
Oh, I did, but the chair's wonderful whiteboard skills and your answers have actually answered them, so thank you.
I'm so pleased. Those art lessons really did pay off, didn't they? Eh? Now, do we have everyone from Guildford here that's coming?
Yes, we do.
Right, it is 10:25. How would you feel if we reconvened at 10:45? Would you like to reconvene at 11?
No, 10:45 is fine.
Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Hannah, it's 10:45, or do you want a little bit longer? That would give us. Is that all right?
It's
Matt?
fine.
You
Yes,
fine?
it's fine.
Okay. Thank you. We will now adjourn the hearing. We will come back at the earlier start time of 10:45. That will just ensure that we have a little bit more of a squeeze for any other matters or sketching that needed to be done. All right, have a wee break. Thank you. Thank you and welcome back to this reconvened hearing. This is the second session. I'm just checking Mr. Williams is still online, and hello, just checking so that we know you're there. And Hayley, can you just confirm for me we've got the transcript still going?
It happens afterwards, but
We've pushed the button.
yes.
Excellent, outstanding, marvelous. So in this next slot, we have Guildford Timber Company, and the way I've written it in the agenda is the way I've assumed, Ms. Hancock, that you would probably structure it,
Yes, I'm happy to.
which is with some introductory remarks from you, followed by Dr. Keesing, then Mr. Hall, and then you doing your closing submissions.
Yes, so
But however, I mean, this is your, okay, and we've had something tabled, which is oral.
yes, I have tabled some oral comments in response.
Okay.
Being mindful of the scope of today's hearing.
Thank you.
I've prepared comments. There may be some of those that you consider to be out of scope, but they were in response to matters raised by the other submitters, and I wasn't sure quite how you were going to deal with those.
Well,
on the day.
we'll
So
see how we go, won't we?
feel free to discard them. if
All
you
right.
need to.
So is this what we started with? Or?
No, it's not. I'm going to just take you back to my filed legal submissions.
One moment, Paula.
of Guildford.
Thank you. Hold the line. We have in this bundle additional legal submissions.
Dated 22 March.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So that is you there. Righto.
Right, so obviously we've filed the legal submissions and I understand they've been, they're going to be taken as read. So I'm just going to take you to a few small components of those and then I think we need to get stuck into the evidence because I'm sure you'll have more questions for Dr. Keesing than
Thank you.
Mr. Hall. In terms of the NPS IB issue, we've received some legal advice from Lytle Finley. The crux of that is that paragraph 2.3. GTC accepts that the correct legal position is that where evidence of an SNA is available to council, that there's an obligation to identify that in accordance with that. I have dealt at 3.0 with the signal repeal of the SNA provisions by the minister. I just set that out in case there was any confusion, but obviously the legal position remains that the panel has to consider either law as it exists today.
Yes, thank you.
One thing to be mindful of is at 3.5, you're operating with an uncertain regulatory environment. So just make a plea that Plan Change 49 can stand on its own 2 feet, regardless of any upcoming or intended repeal of provisions. The other thing about that is that while some councils have heeded the minister or associate minister's call to put things on hold, I don't think that that's something that the panel should consider. You're a long way through a hearing process. A lot of people have invested in that process. And ultimately, regardless of whether there's an SNA in existence or not at the time that you make the decision, there's still policy 23 of the RTS and 6C of the RMA to consider. So
yeah, thank you.
Be mindful of those obligations. Outstanding issues. There's, as we've seen this morning, a high amount of agreement between Mr. Goldwater and Dr. Keesing. Primary area of disagreement is whether or not the Ponga Namaku bit in the middle is calling it.
Yep.
Meets the ecological criteria in the UPSIB. I've set out what I thought that was at the time that I wrote submissions, but obviously you're going to be hearing from Dr. Keesing, and I prefer that you heard what he thought rather than what I thought.
Yeah, that's fine.
Ultimately at 3.14, and unsurprisingly, it's GTC's submission that Dr. Keesing's evidence should be preferred. He's very familiar with the site. He's carried out detailed ecological assessment over a period commencing in 2007. And he's been consistent and unequivocally reliable on those assessments. And the reasons why he's made those, and just reminding the panel, you've got that very detailed assessment in his appendix of the initial evidence.
Yes.
That was filed. Ultimately, you know, areas of disagreement between two professional witnesses is a matter for the panel to decide based on having tested the evidence. Again, if expert conferencing is necessary, and I feel like we've embarked on more of a hot tubbing process in the course of the hearing, so it may not need to be, GTC remains willing and able to make Dr. Keesing available. Turning now to the correct approach, GTC's at 4.6, GTC's submission is that delineating the SNA is a distinctly separate factual exercise to assessing the effectiveness of the proposed plan change provisions, and that the delineation needs to be determined with reference to both policy 23 and the process set out in the NPS IB. It's important that the object and purpose of plan change 49 doesn't influence the SNA assessment. So those things need to be considered separate, and the SNA assessment shouldn't be allowed to procure a particular outcome.
Just pause for a second. Can you just read that again?
It is important that the object and purpose of plan change 49, sorry, should read does not influence the SNA assessment in order to procure a particular outcome. So what I'm saying is that the SNA assessment is a factual assessment to be carried out in accordance with policy 3 and the matters in appendix 1. And that is distinct from the wider considerations of plan change 49 in the Act.
So am I correctly understanding you to say that this hearing should not be considering the extent of the SNA.
No, the hearing should consider the assessment in the SNA, the existence of the SNA. But when the ecologists are discussing the SNA,
Mm,
you need to have a factual finding about the delineation of the SNA based on the statutory tests in
Yes.
the MPS
yes,
and policy 23.
absolutely.
And that's the only things that should influence that assessment.
Yes.
So when you're setting up the SNA.
Yep.
When you're considering, you shouldn't consider or import matters from Plan Change 49 as to whether a road should occur on the spur or not into the SNA assessment. So you have a separate factual finding of where the SNA is,
Yes,
and then you consider Plan Change 49 and
Yes.
ecological effects
yes.
in a different basket.
So am I understanding you then to say the panel should not turn its mind to the impact of a potential road on an SNA?
It's not relevant to the SNA assessment in terms of whether you're delineating that. You have to delineate it based on the facts. So yes,
Okay, let me just ask that again. Are you saying to us that the panel should not consider the impact of a potential road on an SNA?
the panel needs to consider that, but not in determining the geographical extent of the SNA.
Yeah.
It considers that as part of its consideration on Plan Change 49.
I feel like we're talking past each other.
Yeah, I'm saying there's two baskets. The
I
panel
agree,
has two jobs.
I agree there's two baskets. What I want to understand is what you're telling me, because I don't think I've understood yet. So here's a for instance, play my silly game. Say we end up with something the experts agree on and it's a blob up there,
Yes,
but the blob is only going to work if it's a single blob. It wouldn't
Yes.
work if it was cut in half by a road,
yes.
right? Is what you're telling me that we can't think about that?
You shouldn't think about that when you're figuring out the extent of the SNA. So
You shouldn't think
when you're
about
making,
that when you think about the extent
when
of
you're
the SNA.
making this, when you're just determining this,
Yep.
you think about the matters in Appendix 1 of the NPS
Yes.
and Policy 23 of the NPS.
Yes,
You don't think about what it does, what the rest of the plan change will do to that. Once
Yes.
you've determined that,
yes,
when you're considering the effectiveness or the costs and benefits of the plan change 49
yeah,
provisions,
yeah,
that's the point at which you consider ecological effects.
okay, so I'm not missing anything.
No,
Okay, I was just wondering if we were,
there's no magic to it. It's just
No,
what's
it's
in the
just-
test.
it is just as it is, it's
Yes.
just normal,
Yes.
well, okay, thank you,
Yes.
no, that's fine.
And if you look at 4.9, sorry, my concern that I had added there was that it's unclear whether, with Mr. Goldwater's assessment or the officer's planning recommendations, whether those things had been done separately. So there had been a discussion in that as to the number of submitters opposing the transport corridor and some assumptions about the scale of the road going through. So what I was trying to say there is that shouldn't impact, it doesn't influence the initial assessment of the SNA. But obviously those things are relevant down the track for the provisions of Plan Change 49. And if you just get to 4.1, the delineation of the SNA must be done in accordance with the methodology.
Yeah.
In terms of the position of GTC, they submit based on the evidence of Dr. Keesing that there's no word changes required to the officers to the wording of Plan Change 49, and that was set out in opening submissions in the first statement of Mr. Hall. So GTC's position as to what wording is required hasn't changed since the November hearing.
Sorry, what wording we're talking about?
The wording of the plan change, so the plan change provisions.
No, your paragraph says, if the panel adopts Mr. Keesing's evidence, none of the further changes suggested in the revised officer's report are required.
No.
Well, there's a lot of changes in there, I bet, all the green stuff.
Yes, well, we don't see that they're necessary.
You think all of the green stuff in the officer's report is to be disregarded?
Well,
Is that what that means?
as I go on to say, yes, I don't think there's a need for it.
All of them?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, and I'm sure Mr. Hall will be taking you through this.
you'll need to.
In the event that the panel prefer the delineation of the SNA in the form proposed by Mr. Greenwater and consider the suggested changes in the revised officers report, GTC has considered some amendments, but it doesn't consider that the additional changes proposed by the officer are necessary to give effect to the SNA delineated by Mr. Goldwater. And also I'm going to raise some issues around changes that give rise to unanticipated consequences that impact on the intention and ability of the provisions.
Yep.
You're going to hear from Mr. Hall on that because no one likes to hear lawyers talking about planning. In summary, those issues are there's a change in terminology. So adding Silverstream spur significant natural area across all of those provisions fails to distinguish between the areas of the spur that are SNA and which are not. The deletions proposed by the officer mean that there's no rules that deal with the infrastructure corridor or vegetation removal located outside of the SNA on the spur. We've heard this morning from Ms. Rushmere that she thought it was okay to default to the discretionary activity status. In Guildford's submission, and there's some quite good case law on this point, if it's preferential that a panel, a decision maker actually try and deal with conflicts in the plan, and that's a good place to do that. In my submission, you have the evidence before you to do that. So it seems an unusual position to dodge the issue and refer back to a actual rule that's the discretionary that doesn't deal with that tension. So the other aspect is that there's no rule left for vegetation removal located outside of an SNA. It seems a bit odd to me that you deal with vegetation removal within an SNA, but not outside of that. And lastly, that there's obviously that issue around policy 6 and whether the changes are actually enabling, given that there was a dual purpose of the plan change, which was suggested by council to deal with that inherent tension between the natural open space zone and the infrastructure corridor. And in my submission, it's not appropriate to save that fight for another day, given that we've gone through the process where there has been a robust amount of evidence that's dealt with the need for those provisions. Mr. Hall's going to take you through that very long and waffly planning summary that I tried to describe. GTC's position, if we get to 4.32, is that the provisions proposed by the officers are unworkable, and it's unclear whether there's an intended or unintended consequence of the amendments, because there was very little explanation of those. GTC considers there needs to be separate rules for roads and associated utility infrastructure inside and outside of the SNA, regardless of the extent of that. In terms of some concluding comments at 4.42, we have offered a view there as to how to fix those issues by providing some additional rules and things like that. We don't think you need to.
Where are those rules?
So Mr. Hall will take you through.
Oh, okay, he's got all the rules,
detailed.
lovely,
Yeah.
thank you.
But we don't think that they're necessary. And in conclusion, we go to 5.2. The new ecological evidence and revisions to the officer's suggested wording are opposed for the reasons set out in its submissions and in the better evidence. And in GTC submission, Dr. Keesing's, Mr. Reed's and Mr. Hall's evidence and napping wording sought as a result of that evidence should be conferred.
Yep.
So without further ado, what I intended to do now is to call Dr. Keesing, confirm that Dr. Keesing, you provided a brief.
And I just pause you before you do that. I just had a question for you.
Yes.
Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry. So in your paragraph 418, your first bullet point there, 2 new policies. NOS P6, Silverstream infrastructure, intended to enable infrastructure, including a transport corridor within the Silverstream spur, to provide for passive recreation and to support the development of the southern growth area.
Yes.
Do you want to discuss the southern growth area?
Um,
Here is my question. What we know now through the, what's it called? FDS, is that right? Future Development Strategy, is that the land that we were initially talking about doesn't appear to any longer be within the southern growth area. Would that be correct?
the land is known as the Southern Growth Area. It doesn't change its name. So the Southern Growth Area is what the GTC's piece of land is called. The future development strategy that's been approved doesn't include the GTC land as a prioritised development area. But it's softened its stance. That document has softened its stance from the draft. It doesn't, to the point, exclude development of greenfield areas elsewhere. And there's some changes to the constraints mapping in that new FDS, which show that the southern growth area is an area of land that has very few constraints and could be developed in the future if further work is done. So Mr. Hall has actually prepared some notes on some speaking notes on this, and was going to take you through the changes there as part of his presentation, if that was helpful. And I am mindful of the focus of this hearing.
No, I think that this one is on, I think, because the policy is being on relevant.
Yes.
What you've just told me is not to exercise myself, because you're saying that the southern growth area is effectively the name of the GTC land.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And we shouldn't confuse that with being the same southern growth area, although it might be the same land, but you're saying it will still remain the southern growth area. It's not the southern growth area. Variation 1 wasn't about the development of the southern growth area as set out in the FDS.
No, so the southern growth area is a term that's been used to describe the piece of land in lots of other planning strategies over the last 20 years. So the southern growth area was referred to in the notified plan and in that policy as being the piece of land that infrastructure and road and corridors were going to have access to.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's cleared that up nicely.
Sorry, it is a little bit confusing.
Well, it's not now.
I do have the approved version from March of the FDS, which, if the panel was minded to accept into their evidence, may be a relevant document that you want to look at.
Let's just pause. Let me consider whether it's on point for this hearing.
Yes. May I make a submission on that relevance of that document?
Yes, I would like you to.
Yes. Okay. So in terms of applying the NPSIB, there are, and the NPSUD, there are provisions in there that require you to look at some of those future planning strategies. We're considering whether or not the provisions of Plan Change 49 give effect to the NPSIB. And I think there is a question there in terms of some questions around specified infrastructure. But the provisions also ultimately need to give effect to the NPSUD as well.
Yes.
So the council has chosen to change a lot of the provision framework in response to the ecological evidence, and in my submission, the future development strategy, the approved version is the relevant version that the panel will need to take into account for its decision. And the status of the SGA site, how it's treated in that document, is going to be relevant to your consideration.
Okay.
That's something that a lot of submitters have raised. We purposely didn't, because we were trying to keep things narrow.
So just pause for a second. And is that surely that is something that can be addressed through the right of life? It's not?
Yes, it certainly can, and I mean, it's an updated relevant planning document, which I would expect would be addressed in.
And it's nothing more than that. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it's just another part of the.
It's a piece to the puzzle, just like if you had an updated NPS in the meantime.
Yeah.
You need to have a look
All
at
right.
it.
That's fine.
So.
Yeah, by all means. That no, look, I think for the for clarity's sake, let's just don't table it today. Accept your submissions. I mean, when I say accept, we hear your submissions. Thank you. Particularly for any submitters that might have arrived we're going to keep reminding you that the purpose of this hearing is, as was set out in minute 9. And we're not going to litigate things that are outside that very tight and narrow scope.
Understood.
Thank you very much for that. Right,
Do you have any more questions of me at this point, or would you like me to?
Mr. Muspratt,
From me.
Well, I'll call Dr. Keating.
thank you.
The panel will have received an updated brief of evidence
Yeah.
in response to the revised.
Yeah. And the panel notes, I think there is a typo throughout. It's not rebuttal evidence.
Sorry.
That's all right.
He just gets so excited about providing rebuttal, doesn't he?
It's very disappointing to understand. Thank you so much. Let me
Very
just,
sorry. To
yeah.
take that is corrected.
no, I think it's something that's slid through into,
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
Now, Mr. Dr. Keating, I just wanted to check, confirm that have you got any errors or mistakes in your brief of evidence? Is that
Other
correct?
than the rebuttal, obviously.
No, and you've prepared this evidence in accordance with the your duties as an independent inspection.
Correct,
Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Keating's prepared a short presentation.
Is he?
Well, he'll talk to you about these.
All right.
Yeah.
What's the short presentation?
Well, no, it's not a presentation, it's a, I'm going to talk to you. It's
It's
something.
better. You had me
Yeah.
frightened there for a minute.
No. He does have one slide, so just to warn you, we provided that to Ms. Boyd. And it is useful if she could bring that up. Well,
Was it included in your original evidence?
No. Insofar as it's a clear delineation of the bottom line there, which
When
hasn't,
was it drawn up?
it was drawn up before evidence, for primary evidence, it just didn't make primary evidence. You might not think it's relevant now, it's just where I think the bottom line is that we're talking about there on the Mamaku.
it doesn't change where the line is, it just it just enables a discussion of whether there's a buffer or not.
Well, let's work with what we've got and we'll see. All right.
Okay.
Righto, we have your evidence.
Yep.
And how would you like to deal with this? Do
I'm
you
going
want
to deal with it very quickly.
Great.
I'm going to say the only matter that is outstanding in terms of the significant S&A provisions,
Mm.
be they policy 23 or the IB set,
Mm.
is this question about whether there is a buffer and linkage function here associated with the Mamaku. Mr. Goldwater and I agree that it's not representative of the diversity and variety
So
criteria.
just slow down, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up that table. There are 5 things in that table, aren't there?
Yep. Well,
They are.
yes, you may. Representativeness.
So we've got, hang on a minute, I've got to find it. It was at the back of the table itself, was at the back of Mr. Goldwater's evidence. Grab that, it's written down nicely for me. I know Mr. Muskrat chants these in his sleep, but we are not all quite that. Let me find it. 5 bits. The table, where is it? Help. The table.
Table.
Must I be so specific?
Yes.
Um,
This is the actual.
Yes.
Attachment A in my evidence.
thank you.
It's appendix 1, isn't it?
I think it's one on attachment A.
That's your turn.
Yeah. Well, there's several of them.
Thank you. Now, RPS policy 23 criteria. There are 5 of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Representativeness, rarity, diversity, ecological context,
Okay.
and as we've already talked about, the hunger and
So let's talk about representativeness.
Yeah.
And we are talking about, is this the blue bit?
Yeah, so we
Start
agree,
with the bit
we agree on the middle bit,
we agree on the middle bit, the middle bit's green.
Yep.
Yep,
because that is representativeness.
yep.
We,
You like the gully,
I like the gully,
and I don't think you've got any great concern about the gully.
and I like the gully because it does have representativeness. There is currently beach in there as opposed to,
All right,
and I've walked it, but I haven't plotted it.
that's,
with each section.
yeah,
So I
so
think it
that's,
is.
that's that. Yep, the blue bit.
The
is
blue
the-
bit is the Panga Mamaku, and that's the bit that we agree what it is.
Yes,
We agree it's not representativeness.
do we?
There was
Yes,
evidence, yes, we agree that it doesn't meet the rarity and diversity.
do we agree with that?
Well, we don't.
With the information we have.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Diversity is a no from both of you,
Yes,
is that correct?
Yeah. That's correct.
Ecological context,
this is the one. that we
it's a
don't-
no from you.
Yep.
But it's a yes from you,
Correct.
is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent, and tangata whenua hasn't even been assessed.
Correct.
So we're focusing on, is the ecological context and justification is not something, this is something that's actually in policy 23,
Ecological.
provides a
context of-
corridor or stepping stone habitat for birds crossing the Hutt Valley.
Now, we agree.
Is that what's written in the RPS? That's
The
not something
RPS
else?
says enhances connectivity or otherwise buffers representative, rare or diverse indigenous ecosystems and habitats, or provides seasonal or habitat for protected threatened species. Now, I think we both agree B doesn't apply. But we
So
don't agree.
it enhances,
Connectivity or otherwise buffers representative, rare or diverse indigenous ecosystems and habitats.
or otherwise buffers rare
Or otherwise buffers representative,
representatives
rare.
Yeah.
Or diverse
or diverse
indigenous ecosystems and
indigenous ecosystems and habitats.
Yep.
Enhances connectivity or otherwise buffers
those things.
representative,
Yeah.
rare,
Yeah.
or diverse indigenous ecosystems and habitats.
So what we're saying
So-
is that that blue area performs those functions for either the middle or the bit down here, the
Mm.
bigger bit.
Yep.
And it either causes, I guess, a linkage between those two,
Yep,
or is important, well, or assists, adds to buffering of that one, buffering that.
yep. And you're saying no.
I'm saying it does not take all of that area and those functions
Mm,
to buffer that or that.
mm,
And it is not critical or important or assists in the connectivity between those two. Or between
mm.
those two.
So you're saying it could be bisected.
Yeah, I'm saying that that could be gone and
Mm.
connectivity for the species that currently are there going across there would be the same.
So are you at that point? Do you want to carry on? I'll come back to that question.
Well, and
Because
what,
I've understood that. now.
yeah, and what I'm saying is, and from a buffering point of view, the first question you'll ask is buffering against what? What are you buffering for? Is it
Mm.
buffering against wind? Is it buffering against humidity change? Is it buffering against weed intrusion? Is it
Mm,
buffering against
mm.
people? There has to be a thing that is buffered, and that determines the style of the buffer, the extent of the buffer.
Mm.
At the moment, this is all vegetation
Mm,
there, and the question is, well, what is that or that being buffered by this against?
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't think anything.
Mm.
And if that wasn't there, there might be a slight increase in edge effect here, perhaps, although that would still be vegetation unless you move a lot of it.
Mm.
If you just put a line through here, you just take out some of it, that would still be there, being buffered. In my experience, most of the humidity and wind and weed intrusion requires some form of buffering, and it might be 10, it might be 20 meters worth of using. To be sufficient to
Mhm.
buffer against those things. I think you do not have to have that, and that cannot be attributed to values of buffering these two things.
Mhm. Okay.
Same way in the linkage. I think there is plenty of linkage there, whether that blue stuff is present or not.
Yeah.
The things that are there. So I don't think, and here's what I fall to the NPSIB a little bit too, because that has a more nuanced discussion around context, ecological context, and
Mm.
about what is important in terms of assessing buffering. And it sort of suggests that it has to be important
Mm.
in that function to be significant. Now, I know they're two different things, they run parallel, different.
Mm.
To my mind, though, to put in place the functions and roles of a buffer and linkage such that the thing is significant, it has to be important in those functions. So that has weighted some of my thinking around it.
Mhm.
So I can't see why that Pangamamaku area,
Blue bit.
the blue bit, can, let's use the exact words, enhances connectivity or otherwise, when most of it could be gone and that buffering would still be functional in the same way it is today, and linkages would still be there today. I don't think it has that role
All right,
in a nutshell.
is that you done?
In a nutshell,
You
yeah.
look like you're.
Just in terms of. We did that slide that we do.
Yes,
Yeah.
so
No, you've done that one, is that right? Is this the slide you're
Yes.
talking about?
yes,
Yes.
yes. So that's the line that I demarcate as the SMA boundary line between yes and no, which is a more nuanced than the property boundary that you see on some of these bigger pictures. So that picture over there, for example, which just cuts it down the property line. That's the line, and I think, well, I know that includes an extent of that zero vegetation as a buffer to the Kamahi.
So the reason I'm a little bit, tepid on this is because everyone's well aware of the dates when expert evidence is to be provided. And the reason I asked when this was developed was before it was, it hasn't been developed in response to anything. So I'm going to allow it because I think it's helpful, but I'm a little bit
Understood.
snippy.
Yes.
Can you please circulate this to who's got this and who hasn't got this?
It's literally been printed here.
All right, well, council's going to have a chance to have a look at this, and then we'll have a wee chat about it. All right, in the meantime, would you like to come and get mine, so you can have a wee squiz at that, Dr. Goldwater, Mr. Williams? This is the mapping question, so of course, Mr. Williams is going to have a copy of it,
Thank you.
right?
Yeah, should I just email the copy?
We have to. Do you have questions, don't you?
You just a couple.
I've got one, can I just ask
Yeah,
it?
might be the same question.
You're going to come back to yours. I want to ask this. Could we turn the bits of the RPS criteria into a series of little modular elements? Play my silly game.
Mhm.
I've got enhances connectivity. That's a verb and a noun.
Yes.
Or otherwise buffers. It's another verb, buffers.
Mhm.
Rear,
Representatives.
representative. Rear.
Mhm.
Diverse.
Mhm.
Indigenous.
Yep.
Ecosystems and habitats. So let's start at the bottom. In the blue bit. Are there representative Indigenous ecosystems and habitats?
No.
No?
No, we
Have you agreed on that? Are there rear?
not with the knowledge that we have at the moment, no. So we haven't done hours and hours and hours and years and years and years of surveys, but as far as we're aware, there is nothing there.
Okay,
Yeah, that's true. And
so you're agreeing with that? So in terms of being it's representative habitat, right?
No,
What's the representative word?
remember, representative means hasn't got the right species assemblage and structure that type of community should have, and it is based on a historic condition.
Okay, yep, I've got it now. Okay. Diverse,
No,
no,
You agree?
I say it's like diversity of evidence.
so you agree
Yes.
with that? Indigenous ecosystems and habitats.
what it is, indigenous, it is a habitat.
So,
Yes, I'd say it's greater than 50% indigenous.
right, so that part there, we're going to say, all right, it may not be, for argument's sake, it may not have a representative function, it may not be rare, it might not be diverse, however, whatever that's meant to mean in this context, but it is an Indigenous ecosystem and habitat. And in order for it to meet, therefore, the trigger point, be an SNA, it would have to do one of two things, yeah? It would have to otherwise buffer something.
Well, no, it has to buffer the representative rear diverse. See, I think you've got this bit mixed around.
Have I?
Yeah,
Is that what it
the
is?
buffer has to protect, if you like,
Okay.
representative rear diverse indigenous habitat.
No, I see. But don't we first have to determine whether such a habitat exists?
We did, so it wasn't representative, it wasn't rare, it didn't meet any of those criteria until we get to the last one, which is the ecological context. Does it meet that one is what we're asking ourselves now.
Mhm.
So is it a buffer or does it enhance connectivity between good ones? One would be a good. And that's what we're asking ourselves.
All right, well, you've said it doesn't buffer.
I said it doesn't enhance connectivity or otherwise.
No, you've spent quite a long time at the start talking about it doesn't buffer. You talked about the wind and
Yep.
where that came from.
That's
You
right.
said quite clearly, it
Yep.
doesn't tick the box for buffer.
Yep.
Yeah, would you agree with that?
Not necessarily.
Right, so here we are. We've got a point of disagreement on buffer. And what about, you say it doesn't enhance connectivity? Yeah,
Yes, but you've lost the nuance.
have I?
Yes,
With what?
because the area that I'm asking to be removed from the SNA, the blue bit,
You want the whole blue bit gone?
except that there is buffering inside of the boundary that I'm leaving. So
Well, what-
don't be thinking that by removing the blue, you've lost buffer to both of those important bits. So the new boundary that I'm suggesting that removes that leaves buffer here and it leaves buffer here. There's no
So-
loss of buffer if you like.
You just.
I thought handy. Okay.
It's there. Right. So, the blue bit.
Yep.
There is, at the bottom, we talked before that you think there's something, is this what you're saying, this bit through here?
That's good stuff.
So, yeah, but is that what you mean by there's still some, what do you want, where's this line on your
So
scope?
if you were to
Black,
draw a
use the
line-
black.
If you were to draw a line of the Tamahi Beach forest,
Mm.
it would be like this.
Yeah, but the line on your slide is where?
Here. So there's an element in here which is occasional beech tree, occasional Tamahi tree, but mostly cedar. So this there space,
Right.
which is around 10 to 20 meters on average, through here,
Yep.
is buffer that's left to this feature.
Okay, so we're gonna call that the black bit.
Yep.
Okay? Good, isn't it? Really? It's the black,
Yep, and that's-
black bit at the bottom.
Yep.
And there's another bit up through there somewhere.
So.
No, if it's another bit of that, use that.
So there's a buffer in here,
Mm.
same way. And then I'm saying all of that is not buffering at that.
Alright, okay. So what about connectivity? Then
Yep, so I'm saying it doesn't enhance connectivity.
what the blue bit doesn't
It
enhance.
doesn't. Everything that comes across the edge would fly through the existing pine forest connections and over that. Features without needing to hop down on it, rest on it when you need it.
Take it away, Mr. Muskrat.
What about indigenous species that can't fly?
Such as lizards.
Seeds, lizards, yeah,
All right, most insects do fly, but the insects that you might be talking about that might be spiders, say, which are not insects, could balloon across. Most of the things that are there will fly. So I'm trying to think what might be a snail,
yeah. Tree wetter,
tree wetter, yeah,
maybe some lizards if they're present.
maybe lizards. All would still have a route or a route to it. Does it enhance it is the question? And I'm not convinced that they transport themselves across that different habitat type between Kamahi Beach to Kamahi Beach. I don't think they would, as of right, cross through Punga Gully. I don't think they would make that journey. But if they did, there are many ways they would make that journey and they would still pass through there. I think you're starting to get onto a slippery slope when you start to think that everything needs.
Topography of the blue bit.
So that climbs up to a ridge,
Mm.
and the ridge line is part of the park, and then it drops down into a gully. And that's most of the. And then it climbs back up to the ridge towards the middle, and then there's a plateau along the middle.
So it's flat at the top.
No, it's not, none of his land is flat.
Flattish.
Well, yeah, no, it's.
No, don't touch my hand. No, stop.
Gully through there,
Okay, so it's a
bridge
gut,
up there.
all right, so it's consistent with the rest of the,
Yeah, it goes up
Righto.
and it comes down into a gully and it goes back up.
you still going? Or can I ask?
No, you go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The verb that's in there is enhances
Yes,
connectivity.
yes.
I am struggling to understand how deleting that blue bit
Because we're not deleting it, but let's imagine that it wasn't. there.
enhances connectivity. Surely that part would enhance connectivity.
No, I think that's one of the fallacies of the word. You assume that enhance must mean anything and it must, but not if nothing passes through those that way.
I would assume we're using the dictionary definition of enhance, which from my recollection means to improve.
Yes.
Are you saying that that
If the barking gecko that lives in a kamahi tree has no intention to travel across that landscape to another kamahi tree that is 500 meters away, then it doesn't matter what's in the middle, it's not enhanced. And I can't prove to you that things move between here and neither can Mr. Goldberg. It comes down to a case of you saying, well, maybe that something is enhanced, so just say yes. I don't believe that's the case. I am not convinced that there is anything that needs to and does travel through there that is benefited by that.
what is the evidential basis for this?
Habitat. So a lot of the invertebrates that we're talking about, the insects and stuff, and a lot of the lizards have a habitat they like to live in.
So I understand that, but
And
what is
resource requirements?
my question?
Yes.
You are submitting to us that a fairly sizable, fairly wide, isn't it, through there? If the black bit's 20 odd meters,
Yeah.
then that's a fairly big area.
Yeah.
How wide would it be?
At its widest, a couple hundred meters.
No. So if that were not part of the SNA, it would still be natural open space.
Are we imagining it's like grass or something?
Well, no, I mean, it's natural open space. That's what the zoning would be,
Yes.
regardless of whether or not it's an SNA. The underlying zoning, one assumes to be natural open space. Are there studies on fauna that talk about things like birds flying and canopy corridors, that kind of thing?
There are some limited publications on distances between fragments of birds that fly, but that's on unvegetated. So if that was all pine forest, it would be functioning just the same way as it does today with that tongue. If it were a sward of grass, it would be functioning just the same as it is today with the species that need to pass across there. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is that the panga mamaku in and of itself doesn't enhance the linkage. If it were pine forest, the linkage would be the same. If it were tall grassland, it would be the same.
What if it was something really flat?
If it, well, it depends on if it were concrete, then that would be a problem.
Oh, okay.
But if it were the grass, no.
So if it were concrete, it would be a problem.
If it was entirely concrete, yes.
Okay. So in that context then, this area could be said to be better than concrete.
Yes.
So it has some benefit to connectivity.
Only if it were concrete.
Right, so you're saying that you cannot really understand it unless you're doing a comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the same as what Ms. Tancock said to us at the start of the hearing? Well, I thought Ms. Tancock said we were not to contemplate whether this should be a significant natural area based on comparing it with what it might be.
No. We're talking about, does it enhance connectivity? Does it improve or somehow make better
Yeah,
connectivity for
Yeah.
something?
yeah.
And I'm saying for the bird species there, it doesn't, they just fly over. They
Right.
don't need that
Okay.
mamaku
Oh.
to get across.
Mm.
Does it do so for lizards? I'm going to suggest to you in the round, no. One, because of the arboreal lizards, I don't think climb through the panga as they do through Kapi. And two, the ground species would go across there, whether there was panga or not.
Right. What about,
And the invertebrates really just don't know.
it's not Cyril, is it? It's actually established.
Well, cereals is just a stage. It is an early stage in restoration. It is.
So what about connectivity for plant species?
It is both, it's probably a repository for new seeds for the next cereal stage.
Mm.
So, but that hasn't happened, and it's partly why I look at the retrolands in the 1940s. It has progressed incredibly slowly, this area, and it should be a lot more broadly Kamahi than there is. So I question whether that is happening, but it will happen over a longer term. Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Muspratt, did you have any?
I just had just one quick question. It's about paragraph 3.10. You said that linkage and buffering requirements of functions and their importance are virtually impossible to prove or disprove. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Well, and if you're going to radio tag, say, a whole range of wood grass can say that are present there, and then try and follow them to see whether they do move through this landscape, which no study here in this form has done, it becomes a very, very difficult task to determine that a bunch of species has come from that area and has moved through this landscape to that area. It's really hard to do with our current technologies. And you would have to say radioisotope a bunch of, say, beetles in place A, and then sample place B for an extended period of time to find those isotope beetles or their offspring, if you could, maybe DNA. So no study has done that, and it's, as you can see, it's incredibly difficult to prove that species A was there and is now there, and can pass through the area that you're concerned with too.
Thank you.
Good, Madam Chair. Good night, Dr. Kizin. Thank you for your presentation. You heard the questions which I put to Dr. Goldwater. And I am going to ask you the same questions. So therefore, what is your understanding of Mātauranga Māori concerning Te Taiao?
I have no understanding.
Thank you. That's great. Again, in regards to kohanga and a Māori ecologist and specialist within Te Taiao, are you aware that kohanga has the same qualification as an ecologist?
I wasn't aware that that was the case, no.
Thank you. Just in regards to the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity, and which prioritises the modi and intrinsic value of Indigenous biodiversity, and recognises people's connections and relationship with Indigenous biodiversity. Would you agree with this statement?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no more questions. Thank you.
Have you had a chance to look at the material that the submitters have presented?
So most of it, in fact, yes.
Okay, so there's I've deliberately structured it so that this afternoon the people who did the site visit will be placed together, and that way they will find an efficient way of giving evidence, and we can reduce any duplication. You've seen that in there quite a considerable walkthrough was done. What are in your expert opinion, that walkthrough, does it address, how do you evaluate what they will show us this afternoon in terms of the blue bit and its, well,
I mean, it's a walkthrough, and it will put forward observations of species and things, but it is not a vegetation plot, and it will not necessarily give measures of proportions, and possibly doesn't give you a range of representative samples. but it will give you knowledge of everything that we've seen. It won't help us in the discussion about linkage and buffering.
Why not?
Because there's no data there. There's no information about species A has moved and needed to go through this area and went through this area to area B. Like I just said, there's a lot of this buffering and linkage stuff is without fundamental research or knowledge about what is required. And buffering is about buffering against what element or what component is being buffered against. And so a walkthrough observation is great, but it won't tell you about those processes and observe them through time.
Okay. How is the blue bit any different to the green bit?
The species composition is primarily, it's the lack of representativeness that primarily is different there. So it has a different soil, it has a different moisture.
What are the species that are different between the blue bit and green bit?
So the predominant canopy of Panga Mamaku with Garnier and some of the lower cereal species.
In the blue bit?
In the blue bit.
What are the special bits in the green bit that you like?
It's predominantly the Kamahi woodleaf beach.
Yeah.
Canopy and forest
What
component.
are the good bits of the green bit that you like?
And its diversity, and so it's got more developed shrubs and more shrubbery in the middle tier.
In the green bit?
Yes, so in the blue bit, it's relatively open in a lot of that area underneath the Panga Mamaku.
Yep.
So there are less species, it's less complex, and it is a gradient, as you will appreciate. So on the gradient of simpler early cereal, Panga is down here,
Right.
and the Kamahi leaf is a little higher up here with more species and more development. So it's a time factor. And so we're really talking about difference in time.
Okay, so the blue bit is effectively younger than the green bit, but it's kind of the same.
Well, one day it might be the same.
Oh, one day it might be the same.
Yeah, one day, if it were left alone and we didn't do anything,
Yep.
this would eventually become that.
Right. So it's connectivity at a temporal level. Intergenerational.
Yeah, because all of this, one assumes, all of the seed that is available in those older beta bits could make it into this younger bit, and therefore allow that bit to develop to that bit.
Gotcha.
Excellent. Well, look, I'm just going to interrupt you, Madam Chair, and just say that you do have an understanding of Aotearoa Māori Te Tao, because what you just described there was connectivity to whakapapa.
I just don't think.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's good because you've now addressed E.
Only bags.
Correct. But you have just addressed E. And what you've just said there is exactly why I was getting so pissy before. Because if we don't do these assessments, then we end up at a hearing like this, where someone goes, golly, tangata whenua values, what are they all about? Have we got something we should be ticking in a box here? No? Anyway, I'll get off that hobby horse.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Very interesting. And are you sticking around this afternoon to hear the presentation?
Yeah.
Marvelous. Mr. Hall, you're next. Do you need to introduce Mr. Hall, Ms. Hancock, or shall we assume that he is the same as Mr. Hall?
It's the same as the wall. It's
Jolly good. And one assumes that you have these same qualifications that you had before, code of conduct, expert witness, etc., etc. I will just take you to that paragraph though, if I can find it. So that we can actually get you to just state that for the record. Where are you? Shoot. Hang on, I was doing so well. So,
Sorry, it isn't stated in his additional evidence.
My additional.
But it is in-
back to it, so.
yeah, that's fine. I'm just
there's
going to
one that,
Yeah.
experience development.
Thank you. Just one moment. I'm just going to actually make sure that's just become tangled up in everything else here. That's Ms. Hancock. That's the additional oral signatures. That is Mr. Gold. He shouldn't be here at all. He should be over there. Here is Dr. Keesing. There is Mr. Hall. What's that?
Speaking notes.
Okay, speaking notes, but we're sustaining submission from the author.
I believe so.
Well, let's just have a wee look before that happens.
Yeah, so one of those speaking notes is around the FDS, earlier. There's some points that respond to the forest and bird submissions and then the additional planning analysis that Ms. Tancock referred to.
Right, just one moment. Well, the only reason I'm checking this is just to see whether or not this should have been covered off in your brief of evidence. Okay. Okay, so when we get, this is your speaking notes?
I was going to.
Are you planning on reading these?
I was planning on reading these, yes.
We've got your brief of evidence in front of you, which is what I was assuming you were going to be speaking to.
Yep.
So how about we start with
Start
that?
with that, yeah.
Okay,
And
and how about we do this paragraph by paragraph and just wander through this?
okay, yeah,
Because I'm assuming that anything that's not in here will be what you are considering rebuttal evidence. Yep.
Yeah.
Have you read minute 9?
yes, yeah. And so, yeah, we should have taken the rebuttal evidence and plus there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are you clear about the purpose of the hearing today?
yes, yeah.
Right, so let's start with the evidence. We've got your topics that you're covering, your comment on the extent of the spur, your response to the updated section 42. And at paragraph 3, we've got Dr. Keesing reviewing the ecological assessment, his recommendation that the extent of the SNA remains in its current form. You note in particular that Mr. Goldwater considers that, and then at 3.2, Dr. Keesing disagrees. So at 3.3, you prefer Dr. Keesing's opinion. And ask the panel at 3.3 to reduce the evidence of the SNA that he has identified in figure 5 of his evidence. Been through that, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Excluded area doesn't meet ecological context criterion when considering any amendments. Here's your planning assessment coming. And then we're at 4, which is the extent of the spur being required for infrastructure, including roading purposes. Right, do you want to read through this one?
Yeah. Yeah, so in both Mr. Goldwater's evidence, para 33, and Ms. Rushmere's updated 42A report, paras 262 to 265, they refer to the section 32 evaluation report and the NOS standard 4 stating that a road would require.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said read through it. I mean, just speak to it.
Paragraph, yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, just speak to it. Yeah.
So, so it said approximately 10% required, which equates to 3.4 hectares of land, and therefore vegetation would be required to be taken for that infrastructure. I note the assessment of the effects determined by Mr. Goldwater appears to be a key factor in Ms. Rushmere's recommendation to change the activity status of rule POS 15 for control discretionary transfers below.
Yep.
I'm not clear why the 10% figure was used as the cost benefit evaluation of option 1 in section 32 evaluation report, nor why forest and bird reference a 10% figure in their submission.
How is here? Is this? How is this? Haven't we done this?
So it is responding to those the updated section 42A report.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Which could have had in there, considering that we'd already provided evidence, from Mr. Phil Reed.
I'm not getting it, am I? Are you getting it?
No, I mean, if this is a response to the amended 42A, I would expect it to be in the evidence.
It's also in. It's
And
also
the
Mr.
forest.
Goldwater's evidence, and then it was in Mr. Hall's evidence, and he's explaining why he doesn't think it should be in Mr. Goldwater's evidence or be in 42 in the officer's report.
Okay. I think it's the section 32 evaluation report was thrown with you,
Right, okay, yeah, so I was taking it right back to where.
not for this hearing.
Yeah, okay.
That's kind of, do you understand now,
Yeah.
I'm saying, but that's kind of why my eyes are rolling a bit, so.
Yes, no, I think we
Yeah,
could,
so-
Mr. Hall could just take you to the short point.
Yeah.
Which is that GTC, based on the previous evidence you've heard from Mr. Reid, said that that's about 4.85.
Yeah, but,
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So what I've said in 4.3 is, is that, the only engineering evidence provided at the hearing was Mr. Reid.
this is, again, that's
Yeah, so,
the old
yeah,
stuff,
the
we're
old
not
stuff,
doing that
yeah,
today,
Yeah,
it's not right of reply, this
Yeah.
is specifically
Yeah.
pertaining to minute 9.
And he's explaining why the
Yes, yeah,
component
right.
of minute 9 was incorrect.
Which bit?
Sorry, the component of the council evidence that we're responding to. So Mr. Goldwater in his evidence relies on the 3.5 hectare vegetation clearance in his effects assessment to determine what he says is the bisect of the spur. We just pointing to the fact that GTC did table evidence that said that that was far less.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
am I okay to continue?
yep, no, I see where you're going, I see how it got in,
Yeah,
It helps
yeah,
explain
so
the
we
difference.
were just
between
trying
Mr. Hall
to,
and-
yeah,
Yeah.
obviously. just
all right,
history,
that's
but-
fine, no,
just
I get, I'm there now, I'm
Yeah.
there, okay, sorry.
Right. So in 4.4, I've identified that the area of infrastructure would be approximately 880 meters long, times 30 meters wide. And then I've added an additional clarification that if you added a 50% buffer of area to allow for better design, and also I've talked further in my speaking notes later down that, that also includes things like, stormwater retention ponds. That is,
Yeah.
that, that the area that has been, reviewed by Mr. Goldwater is much higher than what is most likely going to be required to provide for, infrastructure. Spur. As a result, in my opinion,
No, you missed the last,
yeah.
oh, I absolutely want you to read that last sentence,
Yep.
please.
Yeah, so, and it should be noted that that this 1.7 hectare is overland. Dr. Keesing has assessed it's not meeting the ecological context criterion to be classified as needs named.
Could you give us some more information on that, please?
In terms of,
Were you specifying where this road is going to be?
yes, so we had shown through the previous, try not to go back to that.
No, just, but no, I don't recall any specific proposal.
So we talked about how you would, get, in terms of getting 880 meters, you would have to, go from, that, Elm Street side, and the closest way to get there is to go up, up towards the Reynolds Match Drive, kind of other side of the road. So by that, I'm talking about this going diagonally that way.
Oh, so is there now, but there is now a final proposal, is there?
No, so we, as you said in our evidence, we outlined that this is, that's the quickest way to get up there. And
Right,
then we showed an example from the IAF application.
Yeah.
That was actually larger than what was proposed by the council standards,
right,
that went in a similar type of area. But there wasn't an actual proposal there, so we provided evidence that showed there was an 880 meter distance to get up to the spur. And the most likely way of, of doing that is kind of going,
through the blue bit,
through the blue bit in some way, shape, or form.
right,
And it would have that level of area being taken up. So, as a result, in my opinion, the potential ecological effects identified by Mr. Goldwater on the Silver Stream spur, providing the infrastructure required for development of a wider filtered site, Yes and or not are grossly overstated and do not justify the amendments to variation 1 proposed by Ms. Rushmere. So, in terms of the response to the updated section 32 report, I have to go through.
So there's a summary of those in the speaking notes
Summary of what?
of the officers and in Mr. Hall's response. Right. Be helpful. It's on the last topic, so the third to last page.
This is not speaking notes. This is late evidence.
It's this was provided by Ms. Tancock.
Pardon?
The discussion around the rules frame, the additional discussion around the rules framework was outlined in Ms. Tancock's evidence. So we did provide it through the legal side.
Hang on, when?
Through the legal side.
Let me just read what you've got here. Okay. Maybe I'm just leaping ahead. Assessment of amendments proposed, including amendments, problem, okay, these are assessments, it's not,
I'm identifying further issues with the rule framework.
why was it's not provided by way of your evidence at the time expert evidence was requested?
It came through as we were discussing the legal submissions.
But this is planning evidence.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Did you draw this up?
Yes, but it has come, as I've been thinking through the consequences of the officer's report further, yeah.
That was due when the expert evidence was due. Yes, I had not had a request for any late expert evidence.
Yeah.
Aside from one from Ms. Tancock, which I declined. Now, I'm going to pause this right now, and we're going to adjourn so that I can read this, and we're going to think about next steps, all right?
Yeah.
We're going to take 5 minutes and come back.
May I just make one comment that it was actually provided in the legal submissions, and when I said you're not going to hear from me, you'll hear from Mr. Hall as to.
I'm going to take 5 minutes now, and then we're going to come back. Thank you. Okay. Lovely. It's 11 minutes past 12. Lunch is due at 12:15. I'm going to take you back to minute 9. And the purpose of this hearing. Now, the purpose of this reconvened hearing is very focused. It is not a rebuttal hearing, nor is it intended to be a second bite at the cherry. It is to help the panel in its deliberations and to ensure that there are no gaps in the panel's knowledge on the specified issue. Then I'm going to take you to page 7 of minute 9, which is the timeline for evidence. And Ms. Tancock, you will recall that you emailed a request through for an extension,
Yes.
which I declined,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I find that a lot of this material should have been provided as expert evidence and could have been provided prior to the start of this hearing and was not. Now, trying to bring it through as a legal submission means that it's coming from you, not your planner.
I accept that.
Thank you.
And it sits in the legal submission and it's been set out in detail there.
Well, that's fine. So I'm not accepting it from Mr. Hall. If it's a legal submission from you, Ms. Tancock, that's fine, but it is not planning evidence. If you want to do it that way. Now, the other thing we could do is simply, you may not wish to bring it in at all. That's up to you.
If I may, it only came to our attention that there was an issue with the way that the plan operated as I was writing legal submissions on that. I've drawn the panel's attention to those issues. You've got the submissions there and you may consider that as you will. And do with it what you may.
No, let's be clear about this. This hearing has now been going on since 2023. And the planning framework has not changed in this regard, has it?
The legal submissions dealt with the amendments proposed by Ms. Rushmere in her revised section 42A report and dealt with what I called maybe perhaps unanticipated consequences as a result of some of the changes that were suggested. That's all I was commenting
Yes,
on. the
and
legal
that
submissions.
section 42A report was provided according to the timeline.
Yes,
And the expert evidence should have been provided according to the timeline.
yes, and Mr. Hall's provided his evidence that can sit there. I've provided my legal submissions.
Right, so let's be clear with this document that was then provided. Now this is it's the one entitled, well, on my version, it's entitled Speaking Notes of Michael Hall,
Yes,
but you've got something else on yours, I think, haven't you?
On the third to last page at the top, it says additional planning evidence from the legal submissions, but it doesn't appear on the copies that you've been given.
Yeah,
oh no, I don't think that's correct. Mr. Hall, is that yours? I think that.
I don't know how we've got that version.
I
but we
think
have.
the intention was that Mr. Hall may be able to confirm whether or not he agrees with the.
I'm not
submissions.
hearing
I don't
Mr.
know if you
Hall
want to-
in relation to these things, Ms. Tancock, because expert evidence should have been provided in a fair way so that everybody could receive it according to the timeline. This is a very small reconvened hearing, all
Understood.
right? Now, we've all been through this.
Yes, okay,
Okay, and if you look at my annotations along the side,
yes,
you will see road, SGA, 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 all of them relate to the SGA. Yeah,
yes,
for the benefit of the panel's information relating to this hearing. Is there anything at all that specifically relates to minute 9 that will be of assistance to helping the panel form its views?
yes, there is.
Which specific thing is it?
I think the specific thing is that, as we've discussed before, is the new FDA that's been approved and how that applies to
Done
the
that?
site.
Did that?
We've done that discussion. Mr. Hall is prepared to assist the panel
No.
in taking you through with the planning.
Absolutely not.
No, understood.
Should have been tabled at the time.
With
Should have
respect,
come through with the expert
that
evidence.
document was not available at the point in time that the evidence was due.
Then, Ms. Tancock, the appropriate thing would have been to contact the panel and to ask for it to come forward.
I understand that, and I'm.
It hasn't
apologise
been-
For not doing it. It's
No, no.
only been raised by a number of other submitters as well, and I ask that the panel treats the submission equally from other parties as it is from GTC.
So here's my concern, Ms. Tancock. We run the risk of taking this hearing from a very small, very discreet, petite, reconvened hearing about one thing to suddenly then needing to go out again.
Yes.
And do that as
And I understand your concern. there.
I ain't doing it,
Yes.
right? This is this reconvened hearing,
Yes,
okay? We're not going to get into matters outside of this. We're going to stick to our knitting.
I understand, and if the panel does not want to hear that, I understand the reasons for
Yeah.
that.
Not going
I
in. And
just
we will
ask
be
that you're
consistent. We will be consistent with that,
Yes.
all right? But for future reference, this is not how this gets done, okay? Because it's my job as the panel chair to assess all of this stuff and think through who else needs to know about this in advance. Because it's my job to ensure that natural justice is there for all parties. This is why I get so cross, okay? Being gazumped like this, surprising a panel, is a really bad plan. So just an FYI, you know, good dialogue in advance, offline comms are fine. We'll give you the feedback. Like I said, no to you offline before when you asked for the extension, that's all fine. But doing this and trying to come through that way, not a good plan. Okay,
Understood.
Now-
And
shall we go then to your additional legal submissions?
we may,
Dated the 22nd of March.
no,
No, not those. We've done those. Let's do
Second.
the other ones.
2nd of April, and I would like to say with the proviso, before you comment that
I shan't say a word. Not exactly.
one of the things that we did try to do in these submissions was provide a response to some of the evidence that has been filed by other submitters in the same batch. So the
Noted.
material that you've come in,
That's all right.
I understand.
I
that you're
shan't
able to
chew.
respond to that.
All right.
Yes, okay. And being mindful of time, obviously you do have these in writing, so I'll just take you through some key points so that you can step to your table if you need to.
Beautiful. We do need to.
You do. So as I noted, many of the issues that are raised by submitters may not fall within the scope of the hearing.
Mhm.
However, I'm providing some responses to some of the broader issues that have been raised, if that assists. So in relation to Forest and Birds legal submissions, they say at paragraph 4 to 8 that determining whether or not a transport corridor is appropriate, the panel should assess the consistency against the objectives and purposes of the open space, natural open space. So
Your paragraph is where? That's what.
this paragraph 2.2,
Thank you.
yes.
Wait, okay.
And I just wanted to note that part of the panel's job is actually assessing the appropriateness of the natural open space zoning as well. And that the section 32 report from council had advanced a dual purpose for this plan change in recognition that some of those infrastructure corridor provisions were inconsistent with or maybe contrary or there'd be tension. So I think just comparing those provisions to the zoning being considered, it isn't the right exercise. There's been at 2.3, there was suggestion made by many submissions that the evidential basis for the future servicing of the spur is speculative. Again, you've heard the evidence previously in November, and I won't.
Good.
I'd just like to note it is a plan change rather than a resource consent, and you have the reasons why.
Thank you.
From me. At paragraph 12 and 16, Forest and Bird refer to Dr. Mayer's evidence. I'd just like to remind the panel of her acknowledgement in her evidence that she did a desktop review which was based on Wildman's assessment.
Yep.
Again, Forest and Bird haven't filed any expert evidence from Dr. Mayers because I think it's a little unfair for them to be saying she supports Dr. Goldwater when she hasn't actually read his evidence or filed anything to say that. So that's just a let's treat that position with caution. Dr. Keesing's evidence, Council for Forest and Bird at paragraph 16, made a little bit of an unhelpful inference there about the impartiality of Dr. Keesing. In my submission, that's an unhelpful way to approach a difference in professional opinion between two experts. Most experts that will appear before you are paid. Mr. Goldwater is paid, Dr. Keesing is paid, and the Court of Appeal in the Lissagate case has
Got it.
said you shouldn't worry about that. You've had the opportunity to hear from Dr. Keesing, and you'll appreciate that he has made some concessions.
We know how this stuff works.
Perfect. Thank you. The spatial extent and route of the proposed transport corridor. So people have complained about the lack of detailed proposal to assess the actual effects. Detailed evidence was filed by GTC, particularly on that corridor. And I'll just refer you down to paragraph 212 about Mr. Hall's reliance on the minimum length of 880 metres. He relied on the evidence of Mr. Reid. He was the only infrastructure and engineering expert that was called, and no one contested that.
This is today's hearing.
Yes, it is. And you'll be hearing a lot from other submitters this afternoon about this, so.
Well, maybe that's actually for me to guide them,
Yes.
Ms. Tancott,
Okay,
and we ain't going back where we don't need to go.
that's fine. As, I'll take you to 2.15 then. Mr. Hall, seeks to correct the mistake about the extent of the spur that's going to have vegetation removed as a result of building the road. It's not 3.5 hectares or 10% of the spur. It's actually more likely, based on Mr. Reid's evidence, to be 1.7 or 4.85, or less than that when you factor in the buffers that have been provided in that assessment.
And that's key to understanding, the panel's understanding of what effects it is assessing in terms of the road for plan change 49 provisions. So the extent of vegetation clearance is something that you would be looking at. I've added it to 260. Forest and Birds submit that the road transects the spur is entirely inappropriate. It shouldn't be provided for, and in my submission that overplays vote 6C, the RMA and the NPSIB. Doesn't categorically preclude development in all circumstances. For example, the NPSIB contains exceptions, and there's a pathway for specified infrastructure, and similar pathways exist through the NPSFM. So it's not a categorical absolute inappropriateness. I just draw your attention to the Supreme Court decision in Port Otago. I have a copy here if you would like
I
one.
would, thank you.
Yes. And in that decision, I'll just, if you write, I didn't provide the paragraph number.
That's right.
Paragraph 64, 65.
Thank you. That's right.
Confirm that avoidance policies in the NZCPS do not require absolute protection. Cited the Supreme Court decision in Trans Tasman, that was only protection from material harm that was being looked at. Material harm can be mitigated, immaterial harm, by the imposition of conditions at a consent stage and taking into account the temporary nature of the duration of the harm subsists, making it overall not material. So in my submission, the court's comments, and if you read the comments of Justice Raisbrook in that decision, they have a broad application and they're equally applicable to interpreting avoid policies in the NPSIB, the regional and district plans, and the direction to protect in section 6C. They're not absolute. It does really, in my mind, underscore the importance of allowing applications to proceed to consent stage before reaching conclusions or full-blown conclusions about what those effects are. In terms of access to the SGA, I just want to note,
How is this relevant for today?
in response to a number of submitters,
How is it relevant for the panel today?
the material that's been provided appears to relate to off-site, so onto the GTC site. Number of submitters are straight. All I wanted to say is that the scope of the plan change is obviously the spur that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Like to say that it's important that the potential for future roading infrastructure to service this SGA is not foreclosed. And in response to the officer's suggestion that the discretionary activity is the default rule in the natural open space zone, sits there rather than having bespoke provisions in Plan Change 49. I think there's a risk there that it is foreclosed, because everyone knows trying to get consent under a default rule is a little bit different to having a rule framework that has taken into account infrastructure in a specific location and set out what the considerations are for that, particularly when you're looking at the interaction between SNAs and the natural open space. So in GTC's submission, the panel should carefully look at the rule framework, the dual purpose of the section 32 and the plan changes proposed. Think very carefully before tossing that out and leaving an applicant a very narrow default rule rather than a bespoke set of rules that manage information. The future of the zoning of the land will be severely compromised. The rezoning of the land to natural open space if the panel doesn't make provision for the roading and infrastructure corridor and natural open space rezoning. In terms of timeframes, submitters have requested that the panel delete the provisions of the service of the SGA on the basis that the FPS confirms it's not needed. As Mr. Hall was going to explain, but hasn't had the opportunity, in my submission, this is a misinterpretation of the FDS, particularly the approved FDS, that has changed the position. It's important not to prematurely rule out future development of the SGA. So the situation that exists now may not be the situation that exists tomorrow, and the panel need to make allowance for the fact that the lifetime of Plan Change 49 is between 10 to 15 years, depending on this plan review. So a lot can change over that time, and it shouldn't prematurely rule out access to enable that development. The SGA remains one of the largest, and as we've seen in the new FDS, one of the largest and unconstrained greenfield sites in the region. There's a lot of the constraints have been assessed in not there. Planning decisions today are not felt in the short term, they inevitably impact on housing supply in the medium term. And so I guess the submission there is that the SGA should not be hastily dismissed on the basis it's not needed today because it may be tomorrow. Equally, the effects of roading or corridor infrastructure proposal need to be considered at resource consent stage, and concluding comments as set out in opening and revised submissions filed on behalf of GTC on the officer's initial 42A report. So our evidence as per it was in November, I think it's November 28.
You're right there, Dr. Pearson.
What is and right delineation of the SNA proposed by Dr. Keysing strikes the right balance there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, panel?
No, Madam Chair, no questions for me. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hampton.
Bit hard to write rules for a road or the effects from a road when you haven't got a proposal, isn't it?
I think planners do that all the time. In fact, so as set out in my opening submissions, I referred back in November, I referred to the case law around when you need to what you need to do in terms of planning for infrastructure. It's hard to equally plan for a road if the road's not there, but if the road's already there, then you're not doing a plan. So
Bit hard through a plan change process to assess the effects of something which is not yet proposed, isn't it?
it is, but there's a difference between the resource consent application when you've got
Correct.
effects and a plan change assessment.
Yeah.
And again, that was set out in the open submissions in November.
Yes, I know. I'm just referencing what you said at your paragraph 2.15. Was the comment that you made, which I wrote down.
Right.
Thank you very much. We are slightly over time, but the good news is the panel chair who crafted this carefully anticipated that this might occur. We will be reconvening at 1 p.m. Now, Mr. Williams, can you hear me?
Yes, Chair, I can hear you.
Excellent. You will be presenting via Zoom at 1 p.m. Will you have any presentation, any slides, anything like that?
No, Mama, just talking to my submissions.
Excellent. At 1:30, we have a bracketed group of Mr. Skirman, Mr. Grant Taylor, Mr. Scott, who has COVID and is zooming in. Yeah. Now, all of you should have had your slides to Hayley, if there are any. Yes. Do you have them all? Yeah. Okay. I will be looking at those over lunch, because that way I'm going to be doing exactly what I did. Don't think you are being singled out. You aren't. I will be treating, although perhaps slightly kindlier, submitters in exactly the same way. We're sticking to 1:09. If you go into the weeds, I'm going to put you back on the green. All right. So don't get distracted. We're here, you're here to help us make sure that we've got a very specific pot of information. Okay. So we'll hear from you three. Mr. Edmonds, is he in or out?
Not yet here.
Not yet here. And then from Mr. Gurry also, and again, same. And if someone said it, just say, I agree. You don't have to say it as well. 3 o'clock, we've got Mr. O'Malley, and then we have Mrs. Pattinson, who will be joining us via Zoom. Mr. Pattinson, Mr. Bellamy is actually coming in at the top. Is that right? After the tea break?
Before at 2:35, and if we can just push the tea break 10 minutes.
So Mr. Bellamy is after Silverstream Railway.
Yes.
We then have Tony Chad.
I need to talk to you about that.
Excellent. Mary Beth Taylor and Pat Van Berkel.
Yes, I have not heard from them.
Right. We'll chat over lunch. Thank you all. Have a nice break. See you at 1 o'clock.
Shady.
Welcome back to this hearing into Plan Change 49 Variation 1 for the Upper Hutt City Council. In this bracket, we will be hearing first up from Forest and Bird, and Mr. Williams is joining us via Zoom. Welcome to the hearing, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mum. Thank you.
Mom.
Well, thank you,
I've
Chair.
never been
How would you like?
Mr. Williams.
I don't believe it. I can't believe it.
Well, I think we'll just go with Madam Chair if that's all right.
Madam
Otherwise,
Chair.
get above
Absolutely.
myself. Right, we have your legal submissions in front of us. How would you like to proceed?
Well, I'll just speak to those submissions if I may, Madam Chair. It's I'll try to be quite brief. I hope I can be quick. I'm conscious that we've got quite a few people to hear from this afternoon. Some valuable evidence really from submitters who know the spur much better than I do. So I don't want to take up too much of your time this afternoon. With that in mind, I could just actually start by saying I'm conscious that there are a couple of sections in my legal submissions that do perhaps go slightly beyond the scope of minute 9. So I will be skipping over those in my oral submissions. I've heard what you said this morning, but I just ask them, they're mainly in relation to the MPS urban development and the RPS. So I really just ask that they be considered to the same extent that the GTC evidence and submissions on the same subjects. Yeah, I'm grateful. Thank you. So in paragraphs 2 to 9 in my written submissions, I've just summarized Forest and Bird's position. And really, it hasn't changed from the original hearing. So I just ask that be taken as read, please. I won't read through that now, unless you'd like me to.
I did, in going through the submissions over the course of the last few days, just look at your paragraphs 4 and 5, Mr. Williams.
Yes.
I have, I thought quite wittily summarised that, feel free to laugh, as you reminding us not to lose sight of the forest for the trees.
Very good. Yes, absolutely. I think that's a very good analogy. In fact, very apt, Madam Chair.
Man giggled. I mean, it's just winning, isn't it? Carry on, Mr. Williams. Thank you.
Yeah, an apt analogy. No, I'd agree with that.
Right.
I
think we're at paragraph.
So if we go to paragraph
10,
so the spatial extent of the SNA within the spur. So I've said there that, for the purposes of this hearing, we support the conclusions of Mr. Goldwater as to the spatial extent of the SNA. Of course, that's subject to our position that, you need to not lose sight of the forest. At paragraph 12, I've talked a little bit about Dr. Mastek's evidence.
Just 1 moment. Paragraph 11.
Oh, yes.
That's referencing the blue bit?
It is, correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Just confirming with Mr. Goldwater that that's an accurate reflection of what you've said?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there we're talking about the buffering function of this Ponga Mamuka area that's in between the two more established areas of forest.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So paragraph 12.
Yeah, paragraph 12, I've said that I understand now that Mr. Goldwater did see Dr. Mastek's evidence, so I'm grateful for that clarification. Really, I understand, Dr. Mastek hasn't provided further evidence. When I say that her evidence sort of broadly supports what Mr. Goldwater has said, it's really this point that they both place greater weight on well, in Dr. Mastek's words, the fragmentation of habitat and the consequential disruption to ecological connectivity. So they both take this, place more weight on issues of connectivity, buffering, and take a more sort of holistic perspective, if you like, of this whole area of the spur. And then at paragraph 13, I've talked about, this is my understanding, and it's my understanding from hearing the evidence this morning, that it's pretty clear now that GTC's preferred scenario is for a road to pass directly through what we've been talking about as the blue area. I can't really see the whiteboard very well, I have to say, but my understanding is that is the area of Ponga, Mamuka, Freefern, yeah.
Yes.
So certainly my understanding now is that that is GTC's preferred scenario, is that the road would pass directly through that area, essentially between the two established areas of Kami Beach Forest. So that would pass directly through the area that's identified by Mr. Goldwater as an SNA. And then I've quoted Mr. Goldwater again at paragraph 14. So I mean, perhaps if he had a copy of my submissions, he could again confirm that is a direct quote from his statement.
He's nodding.
So, well, in my submission, GTC really ought to have been clearer about this.
You've got Dr. Keesing at paragraph 15.
Oh, I've got Dr. Keesing at paragraph 15. Indeed, I do. Before I just move on to that, I just wanted to comment briefly on the route of the road.
My apologies. Yeah.
So yeah, GTC really ought to have been clearer about that in my submission. If they're seeking to provide for a road in a specific location as a controlled activity, my understanding is that that would mean that a consent would need to be granted, albeit conditions could be attached. And it's in a defined location, then really there should be more information about the likely environmental impact of that activity, because it is quite a specific activity that they're seeking to include as a controlled activity.
Yeah.
And then at paragraph 15, Dr. Keesing has acknowledged that linkage and buffering requirements or functions and their importance are virtually impossible to prove or disprove. Yeah, and my understanding from listening to Dr. Keesing this morning was that there isn't really an evidential basis for scientific proof of a buffering or connectivity function of this area. Neither he nor Mr. Goldwater have in fact gone and done the rather extensive sort of investigations, which I understood Dr. Keesing to say would be necessary. I think he was talking about attaching radio devices to lizards and so on in order to actually prove scientifically that there was a connection or a connecting function there. So in my submission, what this means is that the basis on which he says that his evidence should be preferred, he says that, just quote in his statement, bring it up. He talks about Mr. Goldwater having, at paragraph 2.4, he says that the level of investigation undertaken by Mr. Goldwater is not sufficient for him to come to the conclusion that the lower quality vegetation should be included in the SNA based on the significance criteria. This is that my recommendation of the revised extent on the spur is based on more extensive investigations of the site over a period of time, as outlined in sections 4 and 5 of my evidence in chief. But my understanding of what Dr. Keesing is actually saying is that despite the fact that he may have spent more time, I'm not sure there than Mr. Goldwater, he still doesn't have or didn't conduct the kind of investigation that would be needed in order to prove scientifically whether or not there was a connecting function. So really his basis for saying that his evidence should be preferred over that of Mr. Goldwater falls away in relation to this area. And we are really left with quite a subjective assessment. And I have two comments really to make about that. The first is that in that very subjective context, in my submission, I think it is fair to say that Mr. Goldwater is better placed to make a fully impartial assessment. And also, Mr. Goldwater is supported in my submission and in his conclusions by the evidence of Dr. Massey. So hopefully that provides a little bit more sort of explanation for those written submissions. I'd also like to just make sure, if I may, that the panel is aware of clause 3.7 of the MPSIB, which talks about the precautionary approach. So in the absence of information, such as appears to be the case here, I mean, there is some information, of course, but that's not all the information we might desire. The panel ought to take a precautionary approach, and that is in the MPSIB. So I would ask the panel to adopt that approach in your decision making. As I say, quite a subjective assessment. Yeah. I mean, Dr. Keesing, you know, it's true that this proposed activity, it might not remove all of the buffer for the Kamehameha Beach Forest, but it would certainly reduce the buffering, and it would certainly reduce its connectivity. And yeah, really, council should be trying to do the opposite and enhance those features.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. So then at paragraphs 17 and onwards, I talk about the spatial extent and the route of the proposed transport corridor. I won't spend too much time on the sort of precise measurements unless you'd like me to read through those. But really the key point in my submission is at paragraph 19. So I say there that although the likely spatial extent of a transport corridor is an important consideration, so you know whether it's 3 kilometers long or 880 meters long or whatever, that is an important consideration, of course. But even more important than that is the extent to which it would have negative effects on indigenous biodiversity and other ecological values. So I've submitted that if a shorter road that directly bisects an SNA or an area holding particularly high ecological values would be even less appropriate than a longer road through the spur that does not transect such an area. So that really just goes to my point that Mr. Hall's argument that the road will be shorter doesn't necessarily help GTC's position. In fact, in my submission, it doesn't help at all because the shorter road is likely to go directly through this area of significant value. Okay. Or it would have to, I believe. Yeah. All right, so moving on. As at paragraph 21, I've talked about the National Policy Statement on Indigenous Biodiversity, and I've asked the panel to note that clause 3.16 also requires adverse effects on Indigenous biodiversity outside SNAs to be managed by applying the effects management hierarchy. And I've acknowledged in the following paragraph that a discretionary activity status would, of course, enable council to apply that effects management hierarchy. So, yeah, if the transport corridor was discretionary, they would be able to apply that at the resource consent phase stage. But in my submission, it just creates a very unattractive tension within the plan, which could much more easily be resolved at this stage by not providing for this road, which really doesn't sit well at all within the natural open space zone provisions.
So just in there, you maintain your submission that it would be more appropriate to remove NOS R15 now. What do you mean remove it?
Well, delete.
Well, I understand that that's what that means, but what would be there if it were deleted?
Well, I'm grateful actually for council's indication that they've referred us to Rule 19. So it would default to a a discretionary activity. That's my understanding, but more consistent, in fact, with our submissions would be if Rule 15 were changed to non-complying status, which would mean that actually, you know, it would not then default under Rule 19. That would be more consistent with our submissions.
Yeah. Just hang on a second, please.
Yeah, it's not in the 42. I think it's an existing rule in the plan, but it's not included. Yeah, it's in the plan already, default capital rule.
I hated how they do it. Okay, so that's under which chapter?
Not sure actually.
Rule 19, Mr. Williams.
It's the natural open space zone, Rule 19. I don't. Yeah, I had it up before. Was there a natural open space zone at all in the existing plan? Let me just.
There is not.
It's on PC 49.
Hang on, I'm getting just 1 moment. I'll just translate. There is
It's
no.
on PC 49, but I would need to check whether there's an existing catch-all for the open space zones in the operative plan. But the NOSZ R19 specifically came from presentation.
Here's one I did earlier. Carry on, Mr. Williams.
Oh, yeah. So my understanding is that that default rule would not apply to a non-complying activity. So in my submission, a good course of action would be to change the activity status of Rule 15 to non-complying. And that would just mean that various other provisions in the RMA come into play if an application for a resource consent is made. You have to make sure that the effects were no more than minor, those sorts of things.
Yep.
All right. I'll skip over. Oh, sorry. No,
you're
okay. I'll skip over paragraphs 24 to 32, as I've indicated. I'd ask that those could be taken as read, and as I've already mentioned, just taken into account to the extent that you're taking those matters into account for GTC. At paragraph 33, I've mentioned objective 16 of the RPS, which is important in my submission, and that requires that Indigenous ecosystems and habitats with significant biodiversity values are maintained and restored to a healthy functioning state. And that really is, as I understand it, certainly the intention of Forest and Bird and many other submitters in relation to the spur, is that this area should be restored to a healthy functioning state, thriving ecosystem to be enjoyed by the community of Upper Hutt and the wider community. So I'd ask that that really remains the focus of the panel in this matter. And then at paragraphs 34 to 37, I've just briefly set out some conclusions. So I've pointed out again that the intention is for a road to transect the SNA identified by Mr. Goldwater. And I've said in my submission that's not appropriate, certainly not as a controlled activity. And I've also said that even if the panel prefers Dr. Keating's evidence as to the spatial extent of the SNA, it would still be inappropriate to make provision for the road. And that's simply due to the significant adverse effects the road would be bound to have on the ecological and amenity values of the spur natural open space zone. And you're going to hear a lot more, I think, this afternoon, potentially, about those values that the community hold. And the final paragraph, I've said, this is sort of reiterating what was said in the original submissions, really, but there doesn't seem to be any clear evidence in support of the southern growth area. I would just raise the point that my learned friend, Ms. Tancock, said a number of times, talked a number of times about ruling out the southern growth area. And I'm not sure that there's any real basis for you to find that this would be ruling out the southern growth area if you were to not make provision for the transport corridor. Yeah, this is not, as I understand it, the only possible access to that area. So please, panel, may it please, panel, those are my submissions. Unless I can assist you further, if you have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Muspratt?
No questions from me, thank you.
Mr. Parafrance?
No questions from me, thank you, Madam Chair.
We have exactly 4 minutes. Sit comfortably. Mr. Williams, I have 2 questions for you. Paragraph 25, you talk about a special associated effects on the special amenity features of the spur. What are those? Where are they mapped?
Where are they? Sorry?
Mapped. What are they?
Oh, I'm not sure if they're mapped at all. I know that this is a phrase that council uses in its planning documents. My understanding, I don't think it's defined in the plan either. My understanding is that special amenity features are simply amenity features that are special in some way. It's a term that's used in the plan. So these would be, in this context, the kind of the conservation values that people particularly hold in relation to this spur.
Thank you. Can I get clarification on that from council, please? Is that meant to be amenity values, really? Or is it a thing? I thought they were things like...
Yeah, so special amenity landscapes.
No, it says here special amenity features of the spur.
Just trying to find a defined
Is it, I mean, what I'm interested in is, are they dots on a map?
I don't believe they are.
It's a feature, it's a special tree, or it's a special something.
Yeah, I don't believe they are, but I can.
Right, no, that's fine. That's asked and answered. I want to get your legal opinion, Mr. Williams, on the tables that sit with the assessment criteria and whether the fact that the tangata whenua provisions have not been assessed is something that the panel needs to be mindful of.
Well, yes, I think it is something that the panel does need to be mindful of. But my understanding is that you only need to meet one of those criteria. So, I mean, perhaps, you know, that's sort of presents a way forward for the panel, even in the absence of evidence of tangata whenua values. I mean, you can still be satisfied that the buffering and connectivity values, the ecological context is there. But absolutely, I can't answer that. Of course, I don't know why it is that there's no evidence in this plan change about tangata whenua values relating to the spur.
So, as counsel for Forest and Bird, you would do these all the time, right?
Do what exactly? Sorry, plan changes, assessments of SNAs. Well, I'm not involved in actually assessing SNAs.
But you would have exposure to them.
I'm certainly aware of them. Yes.
The types of assessments.
Sure. My understanding, I really can't give you a professional advice on how often it is that tangata whenua values are not considered. That's not something I can comment on. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Is that table unique to this region, or is that across the country?
Not sure.
To this region?
The table's taken from the MPSIB, I thought, or is it the RPS?
The RPS applies to the region, but I'm not sure what other regions equivalent policy looks like in their RPS.
So the table is taken from the MPSIB? Is it?
Precedes the MPSIB.
No, so the
The
table,
RPS.
it's from the RPS. So interesting.
Well, then I certainly can't comment. I don't have much experience in the Wellington region with SNAs.
Thank you. I think that's me done. Thank you very much, Mr. Williams.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Between 1:30 and the afternoon tea break, we're going to hear from as follows. Batter up, please. Mr. Skirman, Mr. Grant Taylor, Mr. Scott via Zoom, Mr. Edmonds and Mr. Jury. Now, the way I have this structured is I have assumed that you will effectively work as a squadron of sorts because you were all, the first batch of you were participants in the walkovers, the site visit. And the information that you will have will all flow through together. So I'm sort of viewing this as a seamless presentation, yeah. God willing. That having been said, while there are no, and you'll see for the first three of you, I have simply put a 20-minute bracket because in doing this, I wasn't clear how your presentations were going to flow together. So I have assumed that Mr. Scott is probably not going to say a lot because he's sick. Mr. Grant Taylor's got photographs, Mr. Skirman's got photographs and a PowerPoint. With the PowerPoints, I'm actually going to go up here and ask you to orient me on that map up there where it is you're talking about when you're showing the photos. Yep, that's going to be one of the most useful things. So, after the afternoon tea slot, with the exception of Mr. Bellamy, who is going to have 10 minutes speaking just before afternoon tea, it's a different framework. Each of the submitters in there gets 10 minutes each. That's it. So, let's go. I know you've all read minute 9. Thank you very much. Come forward, Mr. Skirman. And are you all right if Mr. Grant Taylor comes up as well? Is sits beside you?
Yes, certainly.
Lovely. And Mr. Scott would be at the table beside you, but he is Jeremy, and so
I've
shall.
just checked if he's joining us, but I haven't heard back.
Look, we have his written material.
Yes.
We have plenty of people who've been on walkabouts and and similar, and that's the thing. So, Mr. Edmonds' presentation is not part of this bundle, is that correct? So anyway, we'll carry on. Mr. Skirman, away you go.
Tēnā koutou katoa. First of all, got the route that we took for our site visits.
Lovely.
And on the left-hand side, it's overlaid on a 1:50,000 topographical map.
One moment, please. We'll just make sure. Is that all right there with the Zoom?
That's coming.
Ali, we'll just get that so that we can get this into the record and the people watching elsewhere can also see this. So 2 seconds with screen sharing.
I can see that now.
Oh, can you?
Oh.
What can you see, Mr. Williams?
Oh, I can see a PowerPoint presentation, it looks like, with a plan change with 9, Don Skirman, 3rd of April, 2024.
Would you mind just taking us through the slides? Sorry, that was my attempt at humour. Here we go. Righto. Who's Bob Ross?
That might be Caleb.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yep, lovely. Yeah. Right. Change 49. All right, Mr. Skirman, away you go. So this is your walkabout that you did.
Yes, that's correct. On the next slide, it shows the route that we took. That was recorded on my watch, and I've overlaid that on the 1:50,000 topographical map. You can see we followed, starting at the bottom from Reynolds Map Drive, which is just off the map, and then we followed what's shown as a vehicle track on the topographical map, and then we went down what I've numbered 1. It's a bit hard to see there, but there's 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are roughly chronological order, and they're as per my submission. And then on the 1st of April, we did a second one, which is in orange, coming in from Sylvan Wave, and that's number 5 in my subsequent presentation.
You mean slide, so that's the slide numbers for them.
Yes, that's right. Well, they're divided into sections. Sometimes there's three
Peter.
slides per one of those sections.
Thank you.
And on the right-hand side, tried to overlap that on Mr. Goldwater's figure 1, which shows the extent of the SNA and tracks that were previously taken by his associates, which you can see roughly follow the what's shown as a vehicle track.
Okay. Thank you. Shall we get through the photos?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
So next slide is the first gully. It's not the one that was removed from the SNA. This one has never been in the SNA. This one is to the east of that gully.
So I'm going up there and, no, I'll do it.
Right.
That way. Righto, now let me, because otherwise I'll get lost. So say when I drive. So we're about there. There.
Yeah,
So that one there is outside of the SNA. So it's nothing to see here. Yep. Is that what you're saying, or are you saying it should be in an SNA?
I'm saying it should be in the SNA.
Okay, but it's outside. So you think, let me find the black one. So about there, we'll call that one, also an SNA. That's your position?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Alrighty. Next one.
So the orange arrow is slipped a bit, unfortunately, but it's supposed to be pointing to the middle circle there, which is the middle part of that gully. It shows some more photos there. You can see trappings taking place there as well.
So is that about there?
Yeah.
Over that way. Okay. So that's 1B. And the other one was 1A. Is that right?
That's correct.
Excellent. And what's your position on 1B?
Yes, the whole of this gully, I believe, should be yes and no.
Okay. All right.
And there's should have mentioned in the first 1A, the water was observed to be flowing, even though it's towards the end of the fairly dry summer, and the water continued, of course, right down to the throughout the gully. And the next photo, the next slide is 1C, which is the bottom end, which has some tall trees, and David also found a core in the pool down there.
Yep.
Which is, you can see a photo of at the bottom left-hand corner.
Yep. Thank you. So that's gully photos.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's all the gully photos?
Just that particular one.
One more gully? There's a different gully coming, is there?
Yes, later on there is, yes.
Okay. So the gully photos that you've got. You've seen these now? Is this fresh information for you? Okay. Is this fresh information for you? I'm going to let you carry on, right? We're going to go through this, and I'm going to keep my eyes on Dr. Keesing and on Mr. Goldwater. And if you are having a moment, just let me know, all right? Yeah. Yeah. You understand where I'm going?
Having a moment.
Well, you know what I mean. If you're saying,
Yeah.
that actually might be a thing.
Yeah.
If you're getting one of those things, just give me a, yeah. Okay. And because I'm just putting these are so that we can easily pin these for conversation. Okay. So away we go. Carry on. Thank you, Mr. Stephen.
Okay, then we go to section 2, what I've called section 2, which is going up the hill to the marked vehicle track.
Righto. That's 1C is there.
It's about 2A.
2A?
That's right.
So we're still nowhere near the blue bit. Nowhere near the blue bit.
No, that's
Is
correct.
this sort of slope stuff, is it?
Yes, it
Righto.
is, and it's mainly pine forest, but there are honga, and there are also seedlings of native trees that form a canopy evident as well in places.
So, and this is something also you're saying should be in?
I don't Well, I don't think it meets the criteria at this stage.
So 2A, probably not.
I'm saying though that when the trees need to be gradually removed in a way that preserves the seedlings and the other growth that's already there now
Yeah,
to
got it.
speed up its transition to native bush.
Understood. I'm not really sure if something I can use as a white. Tissue or something.
Sorry, I found it.
Found it. You go.
Thank you. I found this morning, so carry on. And then
And-
2B's at the bottom there.
Yes, what I've called 2B is out of chronological order. We did that before we did the first gully, but yeah, it's just showing what that sort of forest is like too. It's also outside the SNA, and